If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
People who constantly travel overnight through reservations, dark forest roads, and wooded rural areas. Have you ever seen cryptids, skinwalkers, dogman, or any unknown creatures on the road?
My friend and I were driving around the back roads of Ballard County in western Kentucky. It was about 2 a.m. I was driving and turned onto a gravel farm road. As I did, I caught sight of something white and vaguely human crawling in the ditch. As we passed, I hit the brakes, thinking it was a person who needed help. "Are you crazy? Don't effing stop!" Blake screamed. I looked in the mirror and saw that it was standing up. Even though it was still in the ditch, it was as tall as the stop sign next to it. It took a step towards us, and I hit the gas. As we drove away, I saw in the mirror that it dropped to all fours and was crawling after us. I didn't start pulling away from it till I got up to about 40 miles per hour. No matter how close I was to it, I never got a good look at it. It was fuzzy, like it was constantly out of focus. I'm not sure why, but something about it makes me think of it as male. Maybe the height? When it crawled, it moved like a lizard, hands and feet flat on the ground, elbows and knees up and out, body wiggling side to side. This happened when I was around 22. I'm 40 now and have never seen that thing again. I've taken many a midnight cruise along those narrow roads, but I've never had the nerve to go near that particular farm road again. Call me a chicken, I'll cluck happily. Well, this really wasn't in the woods themselves, but we were driving to a wooded area in California. I was 12 years old, and my mom, my sister, and I were all driving her to boarding school. Then all of a sudden, my mom says, "Lone Star 189, look up in the sky. You may never see this again in your life." So I looked up, and there was this orange dot in the sky. It was kind of following our car, and then it let out this bright flash. My brother knew a lot about astronomy at the time, so we called him, and he had no idea what that was. Then maybe a few months or less later, I asked my science teacher, who was a skeptic, what he thought it was, and he also had no idea. It was one of the strangest things I've ever seen in my life. I was on my way home today when a creature ran in front of my car. It was so fast I almost didn't see it. Until it stopped when it was safe on the other side of the road. It was standing on 2 legs and had super long arms. It had strange hind legs and the head of a wolf. Its eyes were reflective off my headlights. I fled home to do some research, as this isn't the first cryptid encounter I have had. I didn't know what it was until I started looking into related things. However, I haven't come across any other reports of similar encounters in South Carolina. Has anyone heard of one? Have you heard of the Dogman legend, or do you think it could be something else? So I live in Oklahoma City, Oklahoma. My wife and I were driving one night on a winding gravel road after dropping off a delivery. I told her to slow down because something told me it was vital at that exact second. She slowed down as we turned a curve, and in the trees I saw a glowing white light with glowing bright green eyes shaped like a stag in a small clearing of trees. She slowed way down, and at the next curve there was a lot of dust kicked up. We were crawling at this point and stopped as a doe ran across the road in the middle of the red dirt kicked up on the road. I firmly believe he was a forest spirit looking out for the doe in the area, and I, being spiritual and believing in the power of the night and moon, am very sensitive to the spiritual realm and the fae that share this world with us. I have numerous accounts of supernatural experiences from my time in Oklahoma. This place is insanely supernatural thanks to the native burial grounds and atrocities they dealt with. I work as a trucker, and during one of the flights I witnessed an interesting case. My path ran through fields, forests, and villages. At about 2 o'clock in the morning, I began to think that it was probably time to stop somewhere for the night and just sleep. I had enough time for delivery to move calmly and not be afraid of being late. Driving past one of the villages and entering the forest belt, which was located next to the village, I suddenly punched a wheel. I got out of the car and inspected the damage. The wheel was literally torn to shreds. There was nowhere to go, it had to be changed. There would be no problem if it were one of the rear wheels. But I punched the front ones, and all the replacement work had to be done on the road. It was drizzling fine rain, but in principle it was warm outside. I took out a spare tire, a key, and a jack. Suddenly there was a roar in the forest, and the birds from the upper branches of the trees scattered to the sides. I was stunned because I was standing on the street and holding only a wrench in my hands. It was the only thing I could protect myself with. Then I heard a growl and the crunch of breaking branches. Scared, I immediately jumped into the car and moved to the passenger seat. I lowered the window a little and watched what would happen next. For a very long time I saw absolutely nothing and only listened to something giant moving in the night thicket of the forest. Then someone roared again in the forest, and it wasn't a scream or a growl, but a roar. Thereafter, the crunching stopped, and I sat motionless in the car for about 10 minutes. Thinking it was over, I slowly opened the door, and then branches crunched next to my truck. Along the way, the one that roared in the forest and made noise with breaking branches also stood and watched me and my truck for 10 minutes. I slammed the door again and decided to stay in the truck until dawn. Suddenly, in the headlights, a creature with a dog's head appeared on the road, but it was moving on 2 legs. He ran across the road into the forest, to the other side, and disappeared into the darkness. I closed all the windows and decided to call the rescue service. To be honest, I didn't know who to call, so I dialed the number 1 that came to mind. I was out of range of the network. I sat up all night without closing my eyes. In the afternoon, when there were more cars on the highway, I got out and changed the wheel. After downloading the tool, I hit the road and got to my destination without any problems. I was heading to work in Springfield, Missouri, on Highway 65 at about 4:30 in the morning, and I was zoning out. I was in the left lane of a 2-lane highway because of a parked car on the side. As I started passing the car, something caught my eye coming straight at me from the median on the left side. I got a brief look at a humanoid creature running on all fours, not with that awkward run that people do when they try to run on all fours, more like a deer when it runs. It had long arms and long legs and was very skinny. It looked like a 6 to 7 foot tall golem from the Lord of the Rings movies. I can't be sure if it was a dark color on top and a pale color underneath because I only saw it for about 5 seconds. It looked straight at me as the car was about to hit it, but it disappeared right when I got to where it was. I had a sighting off Dr. Evans Road in Huger, South Carolina, on the edge of the Francis Marion National Forest back in February of 2021. I was driving flatbed out of Canada, delivering some huge steel coils to the Nucor steel plant down in Huger. At the time I didn't have a truck or GPS and was relying on online maps, which had redirected me off the main highway onto a back roads route. The area near the Cooper River has flooded up to near the shoulder of the road, and so I had to be very careful not to veer onto the soft shoulder, and I had about 70,000 pounds of load. It was at this time that I glanced out the passenger side window into the flooded woods and made eye contact with an 8 to 10 feet tall creature standing knee-deep in the water with one arm resting on a broken tree. It had deep sunk dark eyes with long bangs partly hanging over them, a huge barreled muscular chest, and scraggly matted hair hanging from its arms. The skin on its face and chest area was a brownish-gray color. When I saw it at first, it did not initially register in my mind that it was a Sasquatch until about 30 seconds after. I stopped the truck and considered reversing to try and get a video or photo. It was at this time that I was overwhelmed by an intense gut feeling of dread and instinctual opposition to the idea, as if I got the truck stuck backing up, I'd be trapped there face to face with it. Given the gut feeling, I opted out and continued on my journey. So this happened to me some months ago, and since I stumbled upon this channel today and am interested in studying paranormal/cryptid sightings, I figured I'd share it and see what others have to say. I was coming home from visiting family. They only live about an hour away. My dad was driving, with my mom in the passenger seat and my brother in the left back seat. He was looking at his phone at the time this happened, and me in the right back seat. Our house is on the left side of a dead-end street, so we usually drive to the end of the street and turn around before parking. So that night we turn onto our street, drive to the end, turn around, and as we are driving back up toward our house, I am looking out my car window, now facing the houses on the left side, and in between our neighbor's house and the house next to it there is an open space, and through it I see 2 deer. One deer is in the backyard grazing. The other deer is standing between the houses, staring directly at me. This second deer was huge. It stood maybe 8 feet tall, and its head looked a little too big for its body, kind of puffy is the only way I can describe it. I couldn't clearly see its face because of the angle at which the house's outdoor lights were shining. I don't know if this is relevant, but neither had antlers. After seeing it, I was freaked out but didn't say anything because my family doesn't really believe in these sorts of things, and since I was terrified by what this could be, I didn't want to say anything aloud about the creature while it might still be in the area. I'm a pretty superstitious person. I would greatly appreciate any thoughts on this encounter, and if you're listening, thank you for your time. I saw a skinwalker last night. Last night at about 1 a.m. I snuck out of my parents' house to go and visit a friend of mine. I ran about 6 miles through rural country land and back roads and arrived there right about 2 o'clock. My friend and I decided to take a walk over to a local winery that has a playground. As we are arriving, it is 2:59 a.m. We are walking up the winery's driveway, and it splits into 2 about 40 feet ahead. For context, we did not have flashlights, There were no lamps or lights, but it was very bright out last night due to the moon. My friend mentions that they have horses up here in stables locked away, and we could go and see them. As my friend is saying this, a figure on 4 legs walks across the fork in the road ahead, and we stop and are like, oh, it's the horse. It must have gotten out, as we say that it stands on 2 feet, pivots in our direction, and stares at us. Its knees were bent, and it still stood at about 9 feet tall. It was extremely skinny with a human-like head, and its arms were approximately 5 feet long each. It stared at us and then turned away and continued to walk on 2 feet. Me and my friend originally thought it was a horse, then a person, and then we realized it was neither. And we began literally shaking and walking backwards in fear. We then went back to back for about a mile with our phone flashlights, scared shitless, as we heard something in the woods. Keep in mind this is a rural neighborhood with trees on each side of us. As I finally got my friend to their house, I stood there and ended up calling my parents to pick me up. I didn't care if I got in trouble. I was so scared I just wanted to get home. At this time, it was approximately 3:20, and my parents arrived around 3:40. As I was on the phone, I heard something all around me, breaking sticks, running through the woods, and making noise all around me. I was about to cry on the phone with my parents, begging them to get here faster. It stops, and about 2 minutes later, my parents arrive. I get home, and I call my friend to make sure this is real, and we confirm that we did indeed see what we thought we saw. This is not a hypothetical or a story, this happened last night. Never sneaking out again. So I live in Colorado along the I-25 corridor, but I was out in the endless emptiness of the plains that reside east of there. I've been told conflicting stories on whether or not they reside in areas of Colorado, so I am curious what you guys think. Anyway, on to the story. I am a car guy and was out on the long, straight roads in the area doing some pulls and top speed runs for my car. As I was driving, my car briefly made a weird noise, my radio cut out, and the headlights seemed to dim. Curious as to what happened, I stopped and opened my door, ready to pop the hood and see what the issue was. As soon as my finger touched the hood latch release, I was just overcome with this freezing and paralyzing sense of dread. I somewhat panicked and put my foot back in the car and closed the door, and it slightly subsided. Going with my gut, I decided to just turn tail and run, so I put my car in gear and made a U-turn since I was on a dead end. As I turned around, the edge of my headlight illuminated 2 gray humanoid figures. I glanced at them and sped off. They were standing/sitting/whatever about 50 feet from where I was just sitting. I went home and was unable to sleep for a while, lying in bed with my gun close by with this endless feeling of paranoia. Once I finally drifted off to sleep, I remember having strange nightmares about nothing specific but just overall terrifying things. Even just talking about it brings chills to my spine, and I just want some semblance of an answer as to what I saw that night that still makes me shudder even today. Are they ghosts or Sasquatch? There's a town just southwest of Eau Claire, Wisconsin. It's pretty well known for being haunted. The locals in the area don't like people snooping around because of some unfortunate vandalism. Because of this, you can't simply Google where to find the sites. I spent about a week searching there for the church, schoolhouse, cemetery, and the old dock where these ghostly encounters typically happen. A group of friends came with me to check this place out. We drove over the bridge and down the twisting country roads. The pavement turned to gravel, and the road narrowed. On the left, we could see the old dock, but we wanted to get to the cemetery first, so we kept driving. We came to the bottom of a hill. There were steep drop-offs on each side. As we got to the top of the hill, we could see the little cemetery. I pulled into the discreet driveway, and my 6 friends and I got out to explore. While we were in the cemetery, we heard what sounded almost like laughing and knocking coming from the woods. We didn't think too much of it, so we walked down to the old dock, where we heard some rocks being thrown into the river. We started to think maybe the ghost stories were true. This was when 2 of my friends said they saw something big moving in the woods. We were all pretty freaked out, so we ran back to my SUV and started driving down the hill. This is when a log was thrown over my car. I slowed down and kept making my way down the hill while watching into the woods on either side of the drop-offs to make sure I didn't miss any action. Another log was thrown and landed right in front of my car. It was big enough that I couldn't drive over it or around it, and I'm not a good enough backer-upper to back all the way up the hill in the dark on the narrow road. So I got out of the car to move the log, but it was too heavy for me to move. Then I heard a loud, angry, howling scream followed by a series of loud snapping sounds. It sounded like it was close. I yelled for a couple of my friends to help me. It took 3 of us to move it. We got it out of the road, and we booked it out of there. Something makes me think that not all of the activity that happens there is ghosts or hellhounds, like the legends would have you believe. but instead Bigfoot. This wasn't my first run-in with a Bigfoot, but it was by far the most unpleasant. A friend directed me here in an attempt to understand my stepfather's experience. Thoughts? I've heard of many humanoid creatures/legends, but this one has me stumped. The last time I visited home, my 60-year-old stepfather shared this experience he supposedly had quite a while ago but had never shared before. Since then I've thought about it quite a bit, and I get the most chilling feeling. I also want to mention that my stepdad is a very stoic, no-nonsense, extremely intelligent, logical person. Hearing this from him shocked me. Here's his story. My parents live in southern Maryland. One day around dusk, my stepdad was driving home from work along a highway that is lined by forest not far from our home. While driving, he saw two tall, pale, slender figures emerge from the forest. He said they looked at least 8 feet tall and that their bodies appeared to be exoskeleton/insect-like. He said that as he drove by, one of them looked at the car, and he felt as if it was looking at him. When he looked in the rearview mirror, they were quickly retreating to the forest. What the hell did he see? Is there any lore to back this up? I think I just drove past a skinwalker. My sister and I live in very rural Illinois, and we were both super bored tonight and decided to go for a drive. We were about an hour away from any main roads, and I turned onto this small dirt road. It was dark, but far up I could see a massive black figure standing in the road on all fours. I thought maybe it was a coyote, but as I got closer, I realized it was bigger than me. It ended up sprinting off, and my sister and I tried to catch up to see what it was, but it had disappeared into the woods. We were both super creeped out, and the way that it ran was just like how a human would on all fours. As I told her that that creature was way too human, I turned to see where it came from, and it was a super old cemetery with nothing around it for miles. We turned around and sped home, super freaked out. I've never had an experience like that, and I wasn't a huge believer until now, so forgive me if it wasn't a skinwalker. We are both confused and creeped out. Dog man in Alaska? Back in the late 60s, before he shipped out to Vietnam, my dad had an encounter while hunting. I remember him telling a story to a friend. His friend had told him he had heard something out in the woods behind his house. My dad then started to tell his story. While living up in Ketchikan, Alaska, he decided to get one last hunt in before leaving for the military. He was slowly driving down this old logging road when an elk appeared ahead. He stops his truck, grabs his rifle and pack, and takes off down the road to the spot he saw the elk cross. He goes to the edge of the road and sees where the elk have gone down this steep hill, and some of them are starting to move up the next ridge. Taking out his binoculars, he starts scanning the area to count how many elk he can see. As he is lying there on the ground scanning the next ridge, he catches something moving quickly from his left on the ridge across from him towards the elk. As he zeroes in on this thing, he realizes he is looking at the biggest wolf he had ever seen. He said it looked like the size of this thing was massive. When it was at about his 10 o'clock, he said it stopped and went from 4 legs to standing on 2 legs. It reached up and placed its hand on the tree it was now standing next to. It lifted its massive head in the air and began to sniff, looking around. He said that it seemed like in no time it picked up the scent, but it wasn't the elk's, it was him. This creature snapped its head in the direction of my dad and stared right at him. It showed its teeth, then dropped back down to all fours and started toward my dad. He said he lost sight of it when it got to the bottom of the ridge. He grabbed his rifle and made sure it was loaded and started scoping the area below him. As he scanned back and forth, he caught sight of it again, and it was at the bottom of the hill below him, about 200 or so feet away, my dad said. As he focused in on this thing, a bull elk let out a loud bugle, which broke this thing's concentration. This thing snapped its head back towards the elk and took off after them. As it started to climb up the ridge across from my dad, it stopped one last time, stood up, looked at my dad, snarled, and then ran up and over the crest of the ridge on 2 legs. My dad gathered his gear and ran back to his truck as fast as he could and took off out of there. I looked at my dad and asked him what he thought it was. He looked at us dead in the eyes and said, "Werewolf, that's what it was." He said it was the blackest black he had ever seen. Its eyes were yellowish but looked reddish at times. My dad, to the day he died in 2014, believed he encountered a werewolf. That's the only dog man/werewolf I have regarding my family. 10 years ago, roughly, I and a workmate were tasked with installing farming equipment all around NSW, 3 weeks on the road to different places each day. Usually driving back to a motel at dusk or in the dark. One night we are driving back to a town about 45 minutes away, nothing but wheat fields as far as you can see, and it's that twilight time, dark blue. When all of a sudden we see this really bright, tiny light, Like an LED that flashed. The weird part is every time it blinked, it was somewhere different, like vastly different, even changing what side of the road it was on, but it kept up with us driving at 110 kilometers per hour. For about 15 minutes this bright light was blinking all around us, sometimes really close to the car, and then in a split second it was 200 meters away in the field, and then back again. Really started freaking us out. Anyway, we get to our motel, and my workmate calls his mate, who is an interstate truck driver, to ask if he knew WTF that was. Without even hesitating, this guy on the phone says, "You just saw the Min Min light." Deadly serious, the Min Min light. We had no idea what he was talking about and thought it sounded ridiculous. We googled it. Well, blow us down. Exactly what we saw has been chasing travelers across that part of NSW for at least 100 years, it's been documented. They say it's an aboriginal spirit. Freaked us the duck out big time. To this day, I have no idea how to scientifically explain away such a thing or what we experienced and can only say that we had never heard of it before, and yet what we saw matched accounts from decades ago. The Min Min light, look it up. It is 100% real, I put my life on it. San Felipe Road in San Jose. Possibly Skinwalker? Has anyone ever seen anything like this? I went to San Felipe today at around 3. It was around near to 4 a.m. but not yet 4 a.m. when we exited San Felipe. As we were going down San Felipe, the road was very foggy. Everything was fine, but as we were leaving San Felipe, I and the driver saw a translucent, squarish apparition with waves next to the tree. I was also in the front seat, we both really couldn't describe what we saw. But the people in the back seat saw a furry creature with claws hanging on a tree. It was a gray/blackish creature, fat from what was described. The creature was also seen by multiple people before, but no one could ever give a clear description of it since they had never seen anything like it, but it looked humanoid. From other times they saw it walk on 4 legs, and it was fat/thick but definitely not bigger than an adult human. When we went back to look for it, it was gone. Mind you, when we saw it, we booked it and left hella fast because we were all shitting our pants. But kid you not, when we went back to San Felipe, the fogs were mostly gone. I think there's definitely something going on at San Felipe. Also take the depictions of the translucent square and the creature with a grain of salt. Everything happened so fast that when we saw it, we panicked and drove by very fast. But we definitely saw something by the tree, and it's never anything we've seen before. Definitely not a monkey, since monkeys don't live around here. And it was able to fully grasp the entire tree, and it was a big ass tree. Also, I live near the area, and once I heard a shriek from there. My friends also heard a woman scream loudly from there. Is there something bigger going on in this road? This road is very close to a residential area but doesn't connect to anything and has been the site of many paranormal activities. This was about 6 months ago, on a mountain in North Idaho. We have driven the mountain multiple times over the years. We would go off-roading, cruise, or even race on it. It's a drive I love and to this day do, but I'm a lot more cautious. A little bit of background before I explain the weird not a deer thing. We drove about a year ago on the mountain next to this one, hit something fleshy, and nothing was in the road when we pulled over under a street light. While we were trying to see if anything was there, the street light above us sounded like it shattered and shut off, followed by a loud thud. The sound was akin to a steel beam colliding with a car. Booked it out of there. Back to the night 6 months ago, we are driving up the road at 45 miles per hour, blasting music, windows down, and just chatting as we usually do. These small, white, moth-like things start coming from nowhere, almost blocking my windshield. I have never seen those on the mountain before. My friend, Max, and I began to experience a sense of unease. About 2 minutes later, we hit something in the road that felt like a small dog or just roughly that size. We slowed down but, remembering that night, didn't stop. The music got turned off as well. Then on the left, we spot something in the clearing of the trees. It was hunched over, roughly 5 feet 6 inches while hunched. All we could see was its height, a long snoot-like thing, antlers, and joints that looked off. Me, you see that shit? Max, yeah, just speed up. I would rather not deal with it again. So we sped back up, only a minute has passed since we saw it. We heard a bunch of sticks breaking to my left as we drove up the mountain at 40 miles per hour. Whatever it was keeping up. Then it stopped, and there was a thud on our right. Like something fell from a tree or jumped across the road. Then it stopped. We didn't hear anything, and the moth thing slowly disappeared. We made it to the top, played it safe, and went back down that way instead of the narrow dirt road. We heard sticks breaking along our way back here and there but never saw it again. I have really poor headlights, the only reason I saw it at all was because the clearing was on a corner and I was running my brights. We have been calling it the not a deer after doing some research but wanted an outside opinion. My ex-husband and I left a beach town. We were there visiting friends, another couple, at their cottage all day and evening. We left just as the sun went down, about 9:30 p.m. We took the highway to get there, but because I detest highway driving, my ex-partner chose the supposedly scenic route home. He drove rural roads, and we wound up at a stop sign. AT intersection. Turn right or left. No road ahead, only trees. Okay. He went right, knowing that should be west towards our home. Minutes later, we were back at the stop sign and T intersection. Odd. So my ex turned left next, knowing it was the wrong direction, east did it anyway, and minutes later we came to the same stop sign again. I'll add, no embellishments, the road that kept leading us to this stop sign had acres of corn on both sides. Also farmhouses with interior lights on. People are home and awake. Anyway. The third time I could tell he was a bit rattled, but he wouldn't share. He said, I'm turning right, and you watch for any road signs. I followed his instructions, and he did the same from the left driver's side. Nothing. Just tree lines. We ended up back at the stop sign again. My ex said, duck this, and hit reverse. We retraced our steps on the gravel road, turning around halfway into a farm driveway before retracing our steps and re-entering the road. From there, we got home. My ex will never admit the eeriness of that night. We went in circles 3 times. Perhaps in the bright light of day, the roads would make sense. But this was the only time I've ever seen my ex frantic/panicked. Even as a skeptic, he knew something was off, continually arriving at the same stop sign. At the time, we were in our 40s. I may not be accurately describing the circumstances, but the truth remains. I also want to point out my ex had and has an uncanny knack for direction. Better now with GPS, etc., he had it innately at the time and before. When he reversed and gunned it backwards, I knew he was afraid. He's a wonderful, kind person. He'll never talk about it though, anything weird that night. Night encounter near Zenith, Arizona. In the summer of 2013, I'm driving a packed U-Haul through a remote section of Navajo County with my 28-year-old daughter following in her car. It was the middle of the night, pitch black, and the only radio station I could get was KTNN, the Navajo Nation. The DJ had been playing old school country but switched it up, and suddenly the cab of the truck was filled with the otherworldly sounds of the Bear Creek Singers. We had just passed the turnoff to the ghost town of Zenith. Nobody lives out there. It's just devoid of life. All I could see was the road illuminated by the headlights and that insane music filling my mind. We were doing about 70, and suddenly he was right in front of me. The next couple of seconds go like this. There, illuminated in the headlights, is a figure on all fours walking across the highway directly in front of my speeding truck. In place of arms and legs, this creature had 4 long sticks, and the body was draped in a colorful Navajo-style blanket. No head, just those sticks moving back and forth slowly propelling him across the road in the middle of the night. I swerved the truck and just missed him. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw him in my approaching daughter's headlights. Then watched her car make the same last-second maneuver to avoid running him over. I was stunned and just kept driving, reassured that she was still behind me. 30 minutes later, we pulled up to her new digs in Snowflake, Arizona, and her first words to me were, "What the duck was that?" For the record, she is LDS and, almost, never swears. Since that night, I myself have moved to Snowflake and driven that same lonely stretch of the 277 fairly often at night but never while listening to KTNN for fear of creating conditions that would result in a repeat of the incident. I inquired with my native friends up here, and the only advice was don't tell that story anymore. So I still think gods, superstitions, and everything else is BS but will go to my grave believing native culture holds powerful secrets the rest of us don't understand. Skinwalkers are real, and apparently they like to mess with ignorant whites like me. I appreciate any feedback because, like I mentioned, our native friends won't discuss it with us, and nobody believes me except my kid. Oh, and I'm now a big fan of native drum ceremonies, songs, and music, so something good did come out of this experience. I live in the middle of dozens of fields laced with small wooded regions. All of which was once incredibly dense forest and swampland. My road has no street lamps or lights, aside from 2 porch lights that barely light the ducking porches. This has been something I've been afraid of my whole life. I see a tall figure. Bigger than a cornfield at full growth. It has a wide mouth and a long snout, and its eyes aren't red. No, Worse. Black. I have seen it outside of the house on nights when I have left my curtains open. It's got these spiny things jutting from its skin, and its skin is always bleeding. It's sometimes far away, but other times not there at all. I'm not joking. This thing is so much of a terror we have never kept dogs outside for long at night. Nor us. We only leave the house alone at night if we're with someone or it's not far. But the long distance isn't short enough for me. I feel like every time I turn my back to the night, it's running at me. I find myself sprinting from my car on late nights. At one point I was with a friend. He and I were talking about life and driving around the country roads where he lived. It's about 2 miles deep into the forested area, and we got to talking about stories. Bad ones. He mentioned he never felt safe leaving his house at night, even to step 5 feet from the door. I told him the same. And that's when he described the tall figure with bony things sticking out of its back and almost no meat at all on its bones. When I asked him whether or not he had seen the eyes, he was silent. He and I don't hang out much anymore, but it sucks less knowing I'm not the only one. My grandmother swears to have seen things on these roads and in these fields. She and the adults used to gather in the living room and talk about happy things as it got darker. They got into darker stories. I'll admit I sat outside the living room and eavesdropped. It was terrifying to hear these. My parents have seen the figure in the cotton fields in mid-October. Seen it move like a diseased dog. To quote my dad, it looked like a piece of dead skin with ducking broken branches as antlers. I haven't seen the antlers yet. But I still think what we've seen is a Wendigo, or maybe more than one Wendigo? My boyfriend encountered something unexplainable near Holmdel, New Jersey. This incident occurred some time ago, and I would like to clarify that I was not present during the actual encounter. However, I find it hard to explain it with a logical circumstance. My boyfriend and I live in Jersey. He's not a spiritual person and doesn't believe in Bigfoot or any kind of cryptid. That was until one day he was driving late at night on a back road near Holmdel. It was completely dark outside, and he was driving alone. Out of nowhere, he was startled by a bony, pale, hairless, and near humanoid figure. It cleared the entire road in 2 gallops. The creature was enormous, hairless, and pale. He said its hind limbs were contorted and bent unnaturally, like some sort of deer. In utter fear, he just kept driving and did not stop to investigate. I could tell it scared him half to death when he told me the story for the first time. I understand it is often easy to confuse animals outdoors at night with limited visibility. This is particularly true when you're driving and the encounter occurs in a split second. However, we struggle to find an explanation for the color, size, and shape of this thing. I can't think of any local animal that could resemble this description. Through friends and family, we've also learned that the surrounding area has had high paranormal activity for a long time. Though I'm not sure if that is related at all. I just wanted to share this spooky story and maybe find anyone else who's had similar sightings in New Jersey. Time worked differently there, and I hope I never find myself in that town again. Several years ago, I was living in College Station, Texas. The job market there is really rough for anyone outside of academia, but I landed a job as a sales consultant for a digital marketing company. At least that's what they told me. After I started, I found out my job would really be in door-to-door sales, trying to sell digital marketing packages and phone book ads to small businesses. The company was terrible, the managers were pure evil, and the product was awful. I was looking for a new job but needed a paycheck. One day they sprang something on us. From now on, we would only spend half of the year in College Station. The other half, we would be living in a hotel in Abilene and selling phone book ads there. My wife was so understanding. I'd be able to come back home on the weekends, and I had a few promising leads for work. I figured I'd only need to spend a month or so in Abilene. The first time I'm heading out, I actually quite enjoy the view on the trip. The journey was filled with numerous small towns and captivating landscapes. Even better, I check my phone during the trip and realize I'm making much better time than expected. I was actually an hour ahead of schedule. In fact, I was certain that I had checked my phone before and that hadn't been the case. But the clock on the dash confirmed it. And that was when I was just pulling through a town called Rising Star. Being a big fan of horror and occult, I immediately connected Lucifer to the term morning star, which made me laugh. The town was very small. But, despite it being broad daylight, I was surprised to see, well, no one. I didn't see a single person. I slowed down, looking into windows, nothing. It was summer, and there weren't even kids out playing in their yards. I saw parked cars, but no one was driving or sitting in them. That's when I passed what I seem to recall being an old brick drugstore. There, on the side of the building, was a mural of a man with a number of snakes dangling from his mouth. It really creeped me out, especially with my previous Lucifer connection. Part of me was tempted to stop somewhere, just to see if I could find a human being, but that mural changed my mind. And, as soon as I left that town, I looked at my phone and my car's clock again. They were both an hour ahead of where they had been before. I did research later, and there was an innocent explanation about the mural involving a local celebrity who participated in a lot of rattlesnake roundups and, I think, had a Guinness record for doing something like this. I can look up his name again later if folks are curious. Still, that time fluctuation and the eerie absence of people still haunt me, and I regularly have nightmares about that place to this day. I took a different route from then on and soon found a new job, but I always joke with my friends that I have a feeling that I'll be back there one day, and I won't come back. But it is only a half joke. Because that's always what happens in my nightmares. Here is what happened Easter Sunday on the way home from my parents, around 4 p.m. or a little after. I was with my sister. We were driving west on the Beltway between Highway 90 and the Westlake Houston Parkway traffic lights. There are a few traffic lights between Highway 90 and Westlake Houston Parkway, but I can't recall their names. Tidwell and? We passed the first traffic light and were approaching the next one. There was a woman sitting on the curb with her legs and feet out in the right lane. She was just sitting there. She wore shorts, a tank top, and no shoes. A backpack-like object lay on the grass beside her, and she was engrossed in a conversation with her smartphone. But what got me and my sister's attention when we pulled up to the stoplight and stopped was her face. I hesitated to say this, but I know what I saw. Where her eyes should have been were two black spots. Her cheeks were not just sunken a little, they were sunken way in. Not only could you clearly see her cheekbones, but you could also clearly see the zygomatic process, just as you would in a severely starved or mummified person. Her upper teeth were visible as if she had no upper lip at all. You could see the arch of her upper teeth far past where a smile would have exposed them. And her entire head appeared significantly smaller than it should have been. The flesh was an ochre yellow and pulled quite tight and smooth, while the rest of her, arms and legs, seemed normally colored for a white woman. She looked quite literally as if she was already dead. And it was not deformity, burns from a fire, or anything like that. And her head was too small, almost child-sized. I was in the passenger side, my sister was driving, and the girl was less than 5 feet from my window. I got a good look at her for about 2 minutes. At no time did she look up from her phone, and she did not move except for her one hand doing something on the screen. She was not wearing makeup. She had no eyes, unless there was some way to completely cover them with something, I don't know how. My sister gasped but said nothing, and I said nothing for quite a while. Finally my sister said, "Did you see that?" in a very quiet tone, and I said yes. We didn't need to say anything else, we both know what we saw. We didn't feel anything in particular emanating from the woman and didn't notice anything else that looked or felt strange. Just her sitting there. We haven't told anyone apart from her telling her husband. I haven't even told my best friend or my mother. It's still too unreal for me. I'm still trying to formulate an identity for what we saw. A creepy thing happened when driving home at night. This was probably about 10 years ago, but I had been driving home from work once a night, as I usually do. I take back roads to get home before turning onto the main road, which takes me back to my house. Once I had turned onto the main road, it turned into 2 lanes on either side of the road for a brief moment. There is nothing on the right side of this road. On the left side of the road, there are houses and a small open field with more trees in the distance. The hill slopes down just a little bit before dipping upwards at an incline, so I was at the dip at the moment. I had noticed, right after turning about 50 feet in front of my car off to the right side of the road, that there looked to be a guy standing there wearing a white hoodie. I wasn't sure what he was doing, thinking he was trying to cross the road, but I couldn't see any other part of him other than the white hoodie. I remember thinking to myself, WTF is this guy doing? To get a better look, I turned on the high beams to see what he was doing, and as soon as I did that, the guy just literally floated super quickly across the other side of the road, and he was nowhere to be seen after that. It didn't look like he was running, as his body remained constant and glided so quickly across the road. It definitely freaked me out a bit, as I'd never seen anything like that before. There was quite literally no trace of this guy at all once he ran across, as if he just disappeared. I know I wasn't imagining it, as I had slowed down thinking that someone was trying to cross the road. Has anyone ever had something like this happen before? Last year, I became obsessed with the Bigfoot phenomenon. I spent 7 or 8 months doing non-stop research and constantly talking to my girlfriend about Bigfoot, all because I clicked on a video one night. My girlfriend's family, it turns out, has a little history with the big hairy guys. Her uncle was featured in some European Yeti/Squatch hunter after reporting a 12.5 or 13 inches footprint in his backyard. They all live out in the sticks of Virginia. And her brother says that he was out off-roading at night with his buddy in the back of his Jeep when that buddy shrieked and tumbled out of the Jeep. Her brother, driving, started to stop, and his buddy came hauling us out of the dark screaming to just drive, saying he saw some big-ass thing on 2 legs run through the headlights of the Jeep. This guy swears whatever it was, it stood about 8 or 9 feet tall. Girlfriend's brother never saw it, but he has been out in the woods at night and something huge, although he says they are built real thin like and not hairy that he can ever see, says he's seen these things 3 or 4 times, and from what he has found, these things are without a doubt, munching down on the local deer. Fast forward about a month and a half from me hearing about this. It's Christmas Day, we're out at her family's Christmas dinner, great food, people are cool, Sasquatch is far from my mind, and we head out about 5:45 or 6 o'clock p.m.ish. It's just after sundown, I have to turn on the headlights at the end of the driveway. 15, maybe 20 minutes into the drive back home, we're coming up on a medium left curve, and my headlights begin to light up the foot, then the leg, and then the back of this huge thing? I'm still reluctant to say it was a squatch for sure, this thing was easily every bit of 9 feet tall. The foot that was illuminated was on top of the double yellow line and had, I'd say, about half of it heel overhanging the yellow line, and on the other side, probably all its toes, maybe up to the ball of its foot, going past that side of the double yellow. It was crossing the road from my right toward the left and quickly enough that my lights never hit its face, just kind of got its back and shoulder. The thing that really made me slam the brakes was seeing whatever it was step from the double yellow line to the shoulder or ditch of the road in one stride. So my question is, any idea what her brother had seen? And is Central VA some sort of hotbed? Possible Skinwalker sighting in Globe, Arizona. So, obligatory, not my personal experience, but it was shared with me by a close friend over a decade ago, so I'll regurgitate the story in his words here. I was coming back, to Tucson, from Prescott 2 days ago, on my way southbound through a canyon that the 77 travels through. I was driving slowly along a little cliffside road that had very little clearance between the road and the cliff, with the left side of the road being an overhang and the right side being the drop. It's an area that's notorious for car accidents. People drive off the edges of the cliff because there's no railing. As I was driving, I came across a mangy-looking, huge, mastiff-sized dog that was standing in the opposite lane. I am not a superstitious guy, and I saw that the dog had tags on a collar it was wearing, so I decided to stop because I figured the dog wouldn't survive much longer in the middle of nowhere. I parked in the little clearance on the shoulder of the road and looked back through my rear view at the dog. It looked all contorted and just wrong. It was massive but had the ears of a beagle and a mashed snout and had matted grayish fur. It stared at me with wide eyes, in the same way a human would look at another human. Not as though the eyes were human, with white scleras and colored irises, but it was inexplicably a human gaze, which was really effing weird. Still, I wanted to try to identify the dog. I got out of my car and walked back to the spot where the dog had been sitting. In the 10 seconds that eye contact was broken, the dog had disappeared entirely. I stood on the shoulder of the road, trying to find the dog. I peered over the cliff, thinking this mangy mutt tried to commit suicide or something. Turning more towards the cliff and looking across the canyon, I spot the silhouette of something. It was the dog. You know the way a dog's legs bend all weird and backwards? I could tell it was the dog, standing on its ducking hind legs, from that. And what's worse is its arms were hanging super low, like they were longer than its legs. It stood for a second, seemingly looking at me, before it turned and started over the horizon on 2 legs. It makes no sense how that dog could have gotten across the canyon in the 10 seconds it took me to walk over. A truck with a reservation plate on it sped by, honking at me, much to my confusion. We later concurred the driver was warning him to get the hell out. Not much scares me, but when I processed what was happening, my stomach turned and I made a break for my car. I started my car and just about pressed on the gas when I looked in my rear view and saw the ducking dog again, walking towards my car. I peeled out and sped out of that canyon, shaken. I'm just glad it didn't seem to continue to follow. A fun little fact to add to this, we were told about this briefly while sitting around a fire in my backyard, but he began to tell the actual story as we went for a night drive towards the Rincon Mountains, part of the Coronado National Forest, at around 12 to 2 a.m. We were essentially in the middle of nowhere. What great timing. Possible encounters? Over the span of a week, I've had several strange encounters. It started when I was sitting in a vacant lot with my buddy shooting the shit when we heard dogs crying and howling. We made a few jokes out of it, but then we watched a deer walk out, and it just The deer's appearance was unsettling. It looked like something trying to look like a deer, its legs didn't move right, and it looked like it was drunk. The deer eventually takes off, and we start to hear the dogs howling and sounding distressed. I was thoroughly spooked. Being native, I have heard plenty of spooky stories about skinwalkers, and as I started to drive, we both noted a putrid smell. The following night as we were driving through town, I smelled it again. Rotten meat is the best descriptor I have at the moment. A deer who looks odd, like the one spotted the night before, runs out and stares my vehicle down before darting off into the darkness. As we finish driving down the stretch of the street, we hear a man scream and nope the duck out. We head back to his house to sit and chill on the deck and theorize about what just happened. We hear a low whistle. As I was walking back out to my vehicle, I could hear dogs howling again. A large black dog runs out from a house and stares me down before it takes off. I drove home with just the worst feeling of dread and uneasiness. I worked the next night, security guard, and had a small area to patrol, literally 2 trailers of equipment. I had walked around the trailers once and was about to do one more loop when I heard an owl, very close by. I kept walking and found a large feather in between these trailers. I was just there. It was lying right where I had shined my flashlight and seen nothing. I went home and was lying in bed and heard something walking around smacking the siding of my ducking house. I heard something trying to open my bedroom window. I'm trying to be as rational as I can, but I'm starting to get a little freaked out. What do you guys think? Thank you for listening. Faster than my eyes could see. I have been lurking for a while, never sharing, and only checking this at work in the bathroom. Well, that just changed. Just 30 minutes ago, I saw something I cannot comprehend. Now I will explain what happened, but below I will provide some other information about why I am dumbfounded, and maybe someone can help me ease this image out of my. This night was cold, dry, no wind, no moon, perfect for nocturnal predators. At 4 a.m. there are no cars, even on a Friday night. As I came up a hill, with only empty fields on both sides of the road and shallow ditches, there was something on the left side of the road about 50 to 70 feet in front of my car. Then I saw a 4-legged gray thing dash across the road in an instant. It was so fast it blurred in my headlights, something low to the ground, and I cannot stress how fast this was. It was there, and boom, gone. This creature was either running after or from something. I must have gone into an instinctive mode, as I came to my senses 5 miles down the road. Looking at myself, the car was going 80 miles per hour, eyes darting back and forth from the mirror and the road, radio off, and both hands gripping the wheel tight as hell. I tried to relax, but the moment of crossing, whatever that was, kept playing out in my mind. Now more details. Driving home from work on the highway going 75, 10 miles per hour above the speed limit, high beams on, no cars in sight. Nebraska winters are a mixed bag, sometimes it's 50 degrees at night, sometimes minus 30 degrees. Tonight it was a nice minus 9 degrees. I have lived here for 23 years, in the same town about 45 minutes outside of Lincoln. The drive home is familiar, as I have been down it since the day I was born. I work nights as a tradesman in Lincoln, Nebraska. We get off at 2:30 a.m. normally, but I was close to finishing a job, and I didn't want the daytime people to have to finish it. So I stayed till 3:20. I was drinking an energy drink because I normally go to bed at 8 a.m., and I was sober, so no impairment on my eyes. Animal explanation: the largest native animals are deer and mountain lions, cougars. Well, the latter is so rare, especially in my area, we haven't had a real sighting in over 15 years. And as for deer, well, they are normally asleep at this time, across flat spots or in low valleys near tree lines or brush. Deer are more sporadic during mating season, the rut, as we call it, and harvesting season. Well, it's neither of those. Also, deer are less active when it's below 20 degrees. Especially when it's close to zero, and when it's cold, they normally are in a herd. Plus this animal was faster than all native animals, and bigger. The color of gray doesn't match up either. If you've made it this far, you're the best. If you have any ideas, please assist me. I'm afraid to sleep and I'm extremely jittery. The lantern. I hate that I can't remember all the details of this memory from 23 or 24 years ago, but I thought I'd share what I can. I think I was driving on the road where my friend's family had a campsite when this happened, and either he or another friend was in the car with me. I thought it was this other friend of mine, and I asked him about it, but he doesn't remember it, so he doesn't think it was him. I wish I could remember who I was with so I could confirm this incident and maybe get more details. Anyway, it was late at night on a very rural, wooded road. It was not a gravel road, but rather a narrow, older asphalt road. As we were driving 40 miles per hour or so, I noticed there was an object on the road up ahead, and as it got closer, I could see it was glowing. I started to slow down, and once we were about 20 yards away, I stopped. As we approached the object, we noticed that it was a small rectangular lantern with a lit candle inside, situated in the middle of the busy road. There were no cars around, and I'm not even sure if there were any houses, cabins, or anything else in the immediate area. I'm pretty sure both of us got the same sinking feeling at the exact same time and simultaneously said, "Let's get the duck out of here." We jumped back in the car and floored it out of there. I watched the mirror, and my buddy was looking back, and we didn't see anything. We were both like, "What the duck was that?" I mean, it's for sure in a very, very rural wooded area with very few houses. Like maybe 1 or 2 houses every couple of miles, and in that spot there was nothing but woods on both sides of the road. Was it just a prank? But who? And why? In such a secluded area. We both sensed it might be some kind of trap. For what purpose? Who knows? But we weren't hanging around to find out, and I'm glad we left immediately instead of lingering any longer. Has anyone else come across something like that before? So living in a small town, central Pennsylvania, I drive around with friends quite a bit to pass time. Tonight a group of friends and I were driving around when one of them needed to go home due to an emergency. We took her back to her car, which was parked at a local softball field, and since it was dark, I decided to park my car facing hers and leave my headlights on to make sure she could see to get in her car. While we're sitting in my car waiting, the 4 of us who are still hanging out simultaneously spot a light. It looked like a large flashlight, moving between the fences of the 2 fields. I was worried it was a random person, which is still scary nonetheless, so I beeped my horn and motioned for my friend to leave, which she started backing out, so I drove back up to the main road. When we turned onto the road, we realized she was stopped in the parking lot, now facing sort of diagonally towards the road. Given what we just saw, I stopped the car to watch her leave to make sure she got out of there okay, and when we looked towards her car, once again all 4 of us in my car saw what looked like 2 figures walking right in front of her car. They were tall and skinny, and none of us recall being able to make out full bodies, only something vaguely human-like. Right as the figures walk out of the headlights, our friend continues to back her car up, and she swings her lights in the direction that the figures walked. It couldn't have taken more than a second for her to back up, but the figures were gone. We called her and got her to meet us a few miles down the road at a store, and we asked her if she saw the same thing, and she saw absolutely nothing. I'm not sure if it was ghosts or what it was, but I'm very creeped out. I think it's worth mentioning that said friends were cracking jokes about skinwalkers all night. I am aware that you are not supposed to mention them. Skinwalker in northern Minnesota, March 2020. So, let me start off with, I never thought I'd experience something like this in my life. I was raised in a heavily Christian household and truly didn't hear a thing about something like this being so far north. That is until it happened to me and I started doing research. So I hope my story can help others like theirs did for me. My boyfriend and I were driving the back roads of Deerwood, Minnesota, going to visit a friend for a little bit while we were in the area. We live about 45 minutes from there. We hung out with them until it started to become dusk and decided to head out. Our friend asked if we knew the back road home to shave off about 6 minutes. Being unfamiliar with the back roads of where I was, I pulled out Google Maps and got the directions. My boyfriend was driving his car at the time, which he had just hit a deer with a few days before. The dims on the car did not work due to the accident, and he only had his high beams. We veered off the heavily forested dirt road, following instructions to take a shortcut that would lead us downhill. We traveled approximately 1.2 to 3 miles down the dirt road, crossing the terrain so that the car's high beams could effectively spotlight an animal walking on the left side of the road. My boyfriend, driving, immediately slowed down, and I realized what I was looking at. A cougar. I've heard of people rarely seeing them in this area but never expected to come across one. I even said out loud, "Holy shit, a cougar?" Little did I know I spoke too soon. Just as the words finished coming out of my mouth, the animal turned around to face us fully and was within 2 steps of walking towards us. This animal changed from a cougar to a large cream-colored dog. Like a Spitz type but too big to be one. One ear up, one ear down, very different from the round, black-edged ears I had just seen, and a very beat-up red collar that wasn't there 3 seconds before. My first instinct was, oh no, maybe the dog is lost. And this is where I knew my eyes didn't mistake me. A deep primal fear started to erupt in me. Something I had never felt before. Every fiber of my being was screaming for me to get the hell out of there. The animal continued to approach the car when I noticed. Not once did the blaring high beams reflect from this creature's eyes. I've seen all types of wildlife at all times of day, and I've never seen a dog like that. Wild or domestic. It also moved very differently. Like not hurt but uncomfortable in its own skin. Was rather lanky. The best thing my boyfriend and I can explain about its eyes to this day is that they were like the Lich from Adventure Time, stupid reference, but I haven't seen anything else that triggers the memories so badly. The dog walked all the way up to the driver's window and peered into the car, making dead eye contact with me. And without thinking, as if my instincts took over, I blurted out, "Don't you dare stop this car." Without hesitation or questioning, my boyfriend slammed down the gas pedal, slinging rocks. The dog kept up with us for a good 10 seconds before giving up. After letting my adrenaline go down for a good 45 seconds, I turned to him and asked, "Did you see what I saw?" He turned and looked at me, clearly distraught, and said, "Yes. What the heck was that?" And we reconciled and realized neither of our eyes was playing tricks. We both saw the exact same thing. At this point my boyfriend has repressed the memory, and whenever I bring it up, he has to rack his brain, and I watch the emotions come back upon his face like the first time we talked about it. For the next 3 months after this, every morning I woke up, its cold eyes peering through the car window were the first thing to flash through my mind. It's gotten better since the paranormal activity in my house has ramped up. The unanswered questions are what get to me. Why me? Is it right place, right time? I'd love to hear similar experiences if anyone wants to share. My encounter with something outside of a Navajo res. It was 2010, and I was driving back home to Los Angeles from spending Christmas in Kentucky with family. I took the I-40 route all the way home. As nightfall approaches and I begin to feel sleepy, I make the decision to stop at the next exit and secure a hotel room for the night. It was in Holbrook, Arizona, about 20 to 30 minutes east of Flagstaff. I get the room, get some Taco Bell, and then, out of curiosity, drive around back roads in the desert, eating. While driving, I was flipping through the local radio stations and found one with what sounded like Native American chants and music. I turned it up loud and rolled the windows down, just taking in the desert at night. Thinking back, maybe this is what drew me to what I saw. Anyway, I get back to my hotel and park in the back lot. In front of me is a raised parking lot with about a 5 to 6 foot embankment leading up to it. I open my doors, grab my bag of clothes, and start to take other things out when I hear the loudest, weirdest roar I've ever heard. It sounded like a bear roar mixed with a pig squealing and a baby's cry. I look up, and there's this thing standing there in the parking lot above me. From what I could tell, it was at least 7 feet tall, maybe bigger. It had the head of a wolf and long arms that stretched past its knees. I see that, and I break out into a run towards my room, leaving my car wide open. I get to my door, and I'm so freaked out that I fumble with the key card for a few seconds. Suddenly, I hear the roar again, but this time it's right in my ear. I finally get the door open, lock it, take all the sheets off the bed, take them in the bathroom, and lock that door too. I ended up sleeping in the tub that night. I spent most of the night researching things on the internet, and that's when I learned about skinwalkers. And where I was staying was right on the edge of a Navajo reservation. Luckily I made it through the night without incident, and incredibly, nothing was stolen from my car. I had thousands of dollars of music equipment in the back, and the doors had been wide open all night since I ran from that thing. I barely slept, and as soon as the sun was up, I got the hell out of there. I had to stop at a gas station/liquor store in Holbrook before I could get on the interstate, and they didn't open until 7 a.m., but there was already a line out front waiting for liquor, I guess. So I'm waiting in line with everyone else, and a guy strikes up a conversation with me. He asked about where I'm from, what I'm doing so close to the res, etc., and for some reason I just blurted out what happened to me the night before. He looked at me in the eyes for a second, then laughed and said, "Usually they don't mess with white people." That's my story. I'm uncertain whether it was a skinwalker or something else entirely. But it definitely opened up my worldview. If something like that exists, what other possibilities might be out there that we haven't considered? The Salt Creek Monster. I live near Lincoln, Illinois. Lincoln is centrally located in Illinois. It is 30 miles from the state capital, Springfield, and 35 miles each from Bloomington, Normal, Peoria, and Decatur. It has a population of about 12,000. I am now 50 years old, but when I was a little boy, 3 to 4, I and my family had an encounter with the Salt Creek Monster. If you live in central Illinois, that is pronounced crick, not creek, lol. At that time we lived out in the country less than 1/4 of a mile from Salt Creek. This was 2 miles outside an extremely small little village, Kenny, Illinois. My mother witnessed it cross the road right before the bridge that crossed Salt Creek. My brothers had been down there night fishing and placing out night lines. My mom drove down to the bridge to get the boys and tell them to get back up to the house. It was almost 10 p.m., and they weren't going to be allowed to stay out there all night. One of my brothers told my mom they had seen Bigfoot. She, not believing them, told them, "Well, you two boys get in the car, and come on home." They told her they had to gather their fishing poles and gear and to please wait while they got it, and they would walk back up to the house. She agreed and waited while they did that, and they started back down the road. One of my brothers was on foot, and one was on his bike. As they took off, she drove on toward the bridge to turn around on a little gravel drive right before the bridge. She had her driver's side window down. As she got to the drive, a horrible smell of garbage, mixed with rotten sewage water, practically smacked her in the face through the window. In the headlights, a 6-foot-tall, man-shaped thing crossed the road from one side to the other. It was light gray and completely covered in hair. It looked directly at the car as it passed by. She said she'll never forget those glowing yellow eyes. She said she had the hair on her arms, neck, and head all stand on end, and she's never felt that scared since. She turned into the drive on the right side of the road and slammed the gearshift into reverse, quickly doing a 3-point turn to go back away from the bridge and back up the road to the house. As she went toward the house, this thing was running down the road. It was a full moon that night. The boys had been looking back as they went to see where Mom was, and they saw this huge, muscular, man-shaped thing running in their direction. They later said they looked back because this thing must have weighed a lot, because they felt it running on the paved country road before they saw it. My brother, who was on foot, was so scared that he passed my other brother on his bicycle, running. Mom was freaked out because it looked like it was going after the boys. She swerved over at the creature, and it jumped off the right side of the road, down 15 feet into the deep ditch, and let out a blood-curdling scream. Everyone got back up to the house, quickly got into the house, and locked all the doors and windows. They later said they could hear it walking around the house. It was thudding into the ground and breathing loudly as it went by windows. My sister and her best friend were sleeping out in a camper that fit into the bed of a pickup truck. They heard something walk up to the camper and circle it 5 to 6 times. They could hear deep, heavy breathing, and the dog that was scared of nothing was under the truck whining. It slapped the side of the camper and rattled the doorknob. The two of those girls stayed completely still and even held their breath. They were trying to be so quiet. After what seemed like forever, but in reality was probably 30 to 40 seconds, they finally heard whatever it was. They never looked out any window to see, thud off in the direction of Salt Creek. Some time later, they heard something off in the distance. In the same direction, they heard the thing that only moments before had been circling their camper. Screech. I wanted to share something I experienced in 2018, which, after listening to some of the descriptions here, made me think sharing this would be a good idea. Maybe someone can comment on whether this fits the profile or not. This happened in Urbana, Illinois, during spring 2018 around 8 p.m. I was driving an SUV through a residential area, 30 miles per hour, with moderate street lighting. I was coming back home from grocery shopping and turned a corner into the usual street. After driving 1 block, I saw a large, white-silver, dog-like figure suddenly run towards the right front wheel of my vehicle. I gauged its size to be substantially larger than that of a German Shepherd, with an unusually bright hide. I braked quickly in fear of having run over it. Within seconds, I got out of the car and performed a quick check. No signs of any injured animal, no nearby rustling into an unkempt garden next to where it all happened, and no animal crossing the road. This took less than 5 seconds. Then I paused and saw the same figure 2 blocks away from where I was, looking at me intensely for about 30 seconds. I briefly glanced back at the tire in my vehicle, but when I checked again, it had vanished without warning. All happened in less than a minute. After this, I drove around several blocks without signs of any dog or similar animal nearby for about 10 minutes. Estimating the distance and time between events, I am certain that it is not feasible for a dog, much less such a large one, to run that quickly that distance, particularly without seeing it under street lighting. Possible sighting. So, last month I was driving home from a conference and stopped and slept about 4 hours from home. I woke up at 5:30, started driving again, and around 6:45, a little after dawn, roughly 40 kilometers from the nearest community, I rounded a corner and saw walking up onto the road and towards me an almost human-shaped thing, 7 to 8 feet tall, with reddish medium-length fur over the entire body, very small eyes, just dark circles, a slit of a mouth, a very tall head, fully furred, and a largish white patch on the chest. It walked onto the road and down the margin against my direction, moving in a very fluid, flowing fashion. I thought, wow, it's a guy dressed up as Sninnik, a local word for one of the two types of Sasquatch, and drove past, taking no picture despite having my camera beside me on the seat. When I got home, I drew a picture of what I'd seen and tried to come to grips with it. Did I really see a guy dressed up as Bigfoot, way out of town, at 6:30 in the morning? I decided I must have seen things, but, about a week later, when I finally decided to tell some friends that I'd seen a guy dressed up as Sninnik, after telling them the description, they told me that what I'd seen fit what Sninnik is supposed to look like, including the white patch, which I hadn't heard about before. Everyone here believes I've seen Sasquatch, except me, who doesn't believe they exist. But then, everyone here knows that they exist. And many people have seen them or have stories in their families of sightings. How do you deal with coming to grips with seeing something that doesn't exist? Dog man encounter? It was the evening when I was driving from my house to the local Walmart. I drove around a bend that was maybe 0.2 miles from my house. I was driving slowly because people tend to speed on that road from a connecting lane and get into accidents. It was overcast but not dark yet. I glanced to the side of the road. I always scan that area because random things kept getting dumped there and occasionally discarded pets that would need to be rescued. I was about 6 or 7 feet away from what I saw. At first I thought, oh, a fox, but then immediately recalculated due to the size, almost like my brain was trying to figure out what the heck I was looking at, and then thought, a man in a wolf costume? It was lying on its side and sort of propping itself up. I got a very good look at it as I stopped the car and stared. Despite its reddish-brown color, canid facial features, and fur-covered body, its proportions were human-like. It was at least 7 feet tall, maybe more. It made eye contact with me, and it was like it grinned at me. Its jaw opened, and I saw sharp incisors and rows of sharp teeth. I was close enough that I could see the muscle movement in its face and jaw when it did that. At that moment, I slowly started the car and thought, that's not human. It kept eye contact with me as I drove around the bend until it was out of view. It was almost as if it was saying, I know you see me. I see you too. It didn't seem aggressive or angry, almost like it was amused. My coping mechanism for what I call crazy shit is to go emotionally numb and, like a robot, focus on the immediate task. So that day I kept driving and got the items I needed from the store, almost like I was in low-level shock. When I drove back, the creature wasn't there anymore. I didn't feel the fear that some people have described, but there was an awareness that this was a predator above the human step in the food pyramid, which was unsettling. I also didn't get the vibe it was going to harm me, but that if I tried to attack it, I would regret it. Do you have any thoughts on what that was? Dog man? Spirit? Any input is appreciated. After the initial shock wore off, I have been trying to find more info on what it was and have found very little. It's been 2 years, and I haven't seen it since. Thanks so much for listening. My experience with Bigfoot. It was during summer in 2021. I'm from a small town in Scotland but have family, aunt and uncle, in California. Every year or two we will go visit them. I've always had an interest in mythical creatures and paranormal activities, so when my uncle told me he'd take me to Willow Creek, I was very excited. We went to the Bigfoot Museum and Redwood Creek, but our experience was elsewhere. After staying there the whole day, we headed back to the car. We were on the road back when something happened that I won't ever forget due to the fear it caused me. The road was clear with the absence of any object and not much light, but I knew what I saw. A body of a deer flew from behind trees. My uncle stopped before touching the deer. We looked to our right to see nothing but trees. We stepped out of the car to examine the deer. It had claw marks and small, almost human-like bite marks. Something had thrown this onto the road, and that something felt pretty clear to us. The distance from the trees and road is too far for any normal creature to throw an adult deer. That night stays in my head to this day, and I'm glad I have gotten to get my story out to the world. A student of mine told me about a creature he saw walking strangely and very quickly. So, I'm a high school teacher. I love my job. I teach math, a subject I love but the kids detest, so to keep them on my side, I frequently give them breaks to do whatever they want. So by now my students know I love talking about certain topics, including the paranormal but especially UFOs. We actually listened to The Hunt for the Skinwalker audiobook yesterday in the class that this student is in. Today, this student, who is exceptionally smart and talented, approaches me. Charming, witty, and a great young person, says to me, "Hey, I have a story." He was driving to his home from the gym at about 9:30 p.m. some day last week. He said he was feeling great and had a great pump, everything. He was turning onto his street when he saw a bipedal creature moving quickly in the direction of the road he was about to turn onto. It was in an open field and said it was the color of my classroom wall, basically white, but when I said it was white, he would say no and say it was the color of the wall lol. He said it was tall and slender, but not just skin and bones, it was still muscled. He said it was moving at a speed similar to his car across this field, and he said its legs were long and it had big feet. I'm struggling to exactly recall or honestly make sense of how he described its legs and locomotion, and I'm going to ask for clarification tomorrow, but it also seemed like he was struggling to describe it in the first place. He mentioned its knees being prominent, but also that it seemed to have that weird classic dog leg thing going on, but only when its leg was back. He said when a leg was forward, it bent like a human leg. So I'm kind of imagining it taking these fast, tiptoe looking steps where, when its leg comes down and back, it maybe changes shape or something. He said its arms were long and it had witch fingers. He did not see a head or neck on its shoulders. We looked at that classic 4chan Skinwalker trap cam picture where it's looking at the camera, and he said, "That's what I saw, but without a head." He said it left a tall, blurry trail of its own image as it moved. And then the oddest thing of all, he said it turned into a street sign. So I asked for a lot of clarification on this, but he seemed as confused as I did. He said he watched it cross the street, blend into an existing street sign, and then disappear via this transformation. I've suggested he could return to the location of the sighting and see what he can find or remember. I find this person's report credible, in that I believe that he believes himself. Despite my extensive knowledge of the supernatural realm, I felt compelled to share this with this community. Please let me know what you think, or especially if this rings similar to other encounters. Today I had a very creepy experience on my way to work in the morning. Normally, I don't believe in supernatural phenomena, but I can't convince myself that it was just a typical animal. On my way to work, I often use a small road through a densely wooded area. It is a pretty long and fairly straight road. I left home at around 4:30 a.m. and was driving, minding my business and slowly waking up completely, when I suddenly noticed what I thought was a huge dark gray or black dog sitting next to the road. As it was still dark, I couldn't make it out in full detail, so I slowed down in case it started to run across the road, but when I got closer and the headlights captured it in full, it just stood up and calmly retreated into the bushes next to the road. But as soon as it stood up, it was very clear that the animal was no normal dog. It was huge. It was at least as large as a bear, if not larger. It possessed shorter hind legs, a muscular front, an unusually long snout, pointy ears, and a bushy tail. It walked almost like some sort of hyena, but always on all fours. Big predators are rare here. If one is seen, it's usually a lone wolf or, very rarely, a bear. This stretch of road has always given me the creeps, but now the fear has a face. One thing I had noticed the last few days was that there were no other animals around. Normally there are always some deer, some foxes, or, if I get lucky, even a badger around. However, this week has been particularly quiet. Not a single bird was present. There have also been reports of missing livestock in this area. Last week, 2 sheep disappeared, and yesterday, someone lost a horse. It was later found brutally ripped apart and partially consumed. I don't know if the unknown canine creature is responsible for this, but I highly suspect it. My SAR, search and rescue, pal and climbing partner were driving through the Ojai Valley headed to the Siskiyous. I'm not sure what highway we were on, it was 2002-2003, and we were taking a new way to a new destination. We had just passed a sign saying Ojai Valley. There were no exits or on-ramps for many miles either way. We were on a 2-lane highway that only headed in one direction. There was an overpass, but no way to access it from where we were. We came across a small red hatchback that had been in a terrible wreck. It was in the slow lane of the highway. There was no one else around, nor did we see any other vehicles during our time at the wreck. The driver was clearly dead, with the front end of the car smashed in. Blood was on the passenger window and windshield. The car looked like a bomb went off, its contents were all over the road. There were 2 small animal carriers nearby in the debris. We didn't see anything moving in either of them, nor did we feel safe getting out of our rig. It was a bizarre scene. The vehicle had clearly run into something huge, but there were no other vehicles nor any dead animals or blood on the road. We were both wilderness first responders, my climbing partner was also in med school. Neither of us felt safe there, and we knew there was nothing we could do. We didn't have cell phone reception at the location but had stopped just trying to wrap our heads around what we could do and what had happened. We decided to take the next exit and see if we could get cell service. Before we could do so, a military chopper was overhead, and one of their crew descended on a line. No clue what we witnessed or what the vehicle hit as they were in the slow lane, but it had to be massive given the damage and explosion of car contents. No idea why the military was there. In SAR we trained with the military at times, and occasionally they'd assist with a Coast Guard chopper that had infrared to pick up body heat. A few times over my time with SAR, Army choppers that were nearby assisted with a capsized boat and evacuating some folks for us. So maybe these guys were in the area and able to respond? No idea. Again, we both searched the internet years later to see if there was any mention of what we saw, but we never found anything. My father owns a small delivery service that operates out of Farmington, New Mexico. We primarily transport small packages to remote locations that larger delivery companies find too burdensome. My dad is the only employee, and we have a few pickup trucks and a trailer. One day we get a delivery out to Window Rock, Arizona, on the Navajo reservation, about 2 hours from Farmington. My dad gets the call for the job while he is chilling with his Navajo friend, Travis, and his girlfriend. Travis mentions how he's got family in Window Rock that he hasn't seen in ages and suggests they go with him. I was about 6 or 7 at the time, and it was the summertime, so Dad decided we'll go down together. He can do his delivery really quick, and then while Travis sees his family, we can go check out the Window Rock, a big rock face with a large hole in it that goes to the other side. Pretty cool. We had to convoy in separate trucks since my dad's was loaded down with freight. We decided to bring along some walkie-talkies so we could communicate with one another. We spend our time in Window Rock, everything is generally uneventful, and we start heading home along the old highway with my dad and me in front and Travis and his girlfriend in their truck behind us. I honestly don't remember most of the Window Rock trip, but this next part I can never forget. We're somewhere on the highway between Window Rock and Gallup, New Mexico. It had just rained earlier in the day, and the road was kind of slick, so we were taking it pretty slow. On the left of the highway there is nothing but sandstone cliffs, and on the right there is a huge field separated from the road by a small barbed wire fence. We crest the top of this hill, and down at the bottom of the hill we see what appears to be a very large dog, sitting back on its haunches in the middle of the road, facing the cliffs. My dad calls over the radio. "Hey Trav, do you see that big-ass dog?" Travis starts yelling back over the radio, "That is not a dog. Speed up right now and hit it." He sounds almost hysterical. He just keeps screaming, "Hit it. JJ, you have to hit it. Please. Please. Hit that ducking thing right now." So my dad starts to speed up, and as we get a bit closer, I can begin to see it a little more clearly. It's covered in this brown, wiry, matted hair that appears to have dried blood all over it. It's still facing the cliffs, but the moment our headlights hit it, it turns and looks at us, and it has a face. I don't know how else to describe it other than a mix between a bear's and a human's face. It looks twisted and distorted and almost in pain. As we get closer to this thing, we start to realize it's actually ducking huge. Though it was still sitting on its haunches, it was about shoulder height with the hood of the truck. We get literally inches from hitting it when it lets out this scream that sounds like someone screaming as their lungs were filling with water, and it leaps backwards, towards the field, landing just on our side of the barbed wire fence. With another leap, it vanished from view. Travis comes over the radio again, "Holy shit. Keep driving. We have to get out of here. We have to go faster." He kept repeating that last part. "We have to get out of here, and we have to go faster." Pretty soon we are speeding like crazy, and just as we start to come near the outskirts of Gallup, we get pulled over. Travis pulls his truck over with us. Naturally this makes the cop, a Navajo man himself, very on edge, and he immediately asks why Travis felt the need to pull over as well. Travis says, "We just saw a skinwalker a few miles back, and it's been following us." The officer immediately turns white, stammers something about a verbal warning, gets in his car, and takes off. We do the same. We didn't see anything else that night, but when we got home, Travis refused to let us leave without taking some kind of Navajo totem thing that was supposed to keep it away. So, yeah, I guess that's my Skinwalker story. Sorry for the length, but thank you for listening. If any of you guys have had any experiences, I'd love to hear them. The incident occurred sometime during Hurricane Katrina in 2005. I lived in central Michigan. I was driving home from work around 11 p.m. when I thought I saw a bear by the side of the road. The bear was at the end of someone's long driveway, digging in their trash. It was directly under the yard light. I got excited because we weren't supposed to have bears in the area, and I had never seen one. So I pull up next to it to get a better look. It was maybe 10 feet away max. I realized instantly that it wasn't a bear. It had short, shiny fur, kind of like a horse or a Doberman. It was perfectly clean and hugely muscled. I could see its muscles moving under its skin as it dug in the trash. I couldn't see its face yet, so I was confused. It was eating something out of their garbage and hadn't bothered to look at me. When it did, all I could think was werewolf. It had the most hideous face. People say it looks like a German shepherd, but not this guy. He was closer to a hyena than to a dog. It had red eyes that glowed with their own luminance and teeth that would have been more at home on a lanternfish than anything living on land. I just stared for what felt like forever, because I kept expecting to realize what I was seeing was a trick of the light. Then it started to get up, and primal fear took over, and I floored it. I still can't comprehend how any living creature could possess such enormous teeth. I mean, they were ridiculously huge, so huge, I don't know how you could even use them to eat. What I initially believed to be the side profile of a bear by the roadside turned out to be the shoulders of that massive creature. He was facing me, but he had his head down in the garbage, and I was looking at his shoulders, face on. His shoulders were as wide as the side profile of a black bear. I only told my ex-husband and my grandma, neither one believed me. Although I'm uncertain if it was a skinwalker, the experience was truly terrifying. This started back in January of this year. I live on the Front Range of Colorado, meaning that once the mountains stop, it's basically plains for miles and miles. There are a lot of small roads and strange dead ends around these parts, and one of these is a favorite of me and my friends, as it goes a long way out from the main road, with basically no reason for anyone else to be there. This privacy is great for any variety of teenage shenanigans. I was stoned in my friend's car in January, hoping to park at the end of the road to smoke more. As I was staring out the window, I swore I could see the silhouette of a tall, strangely proportioned person running alongside our car. It was far out in the field, and I convinced myself it was just my inebriated mind playing tricks on me so that I wouldn't freak out, and I didn't tell my friends so it wouldn't bother them. We parked there for a few hours with the lights off and then went home without any other incidents. Tonight, I was headed back out to that spot with my girlfriend, both of us in separate cars. My drive up was pretty uneventful, but there was some fog that made it pretty spooky. After we parked, my girlfriend got into my car and seemed visibly shaken. Once I got her to calm down, she told me what had happened. On the drive up, she had looked out her window and seen a tall, dark figure exactly like what I had seen 11 months ago, but this time it was just standing there. Staring. As soon as she made eye contact with it, her car radio turned to static. She pretty quickly turned it off and hauled ass to meet up with me. I cannot stress enough how little she believes in the supernatural, so seeing her as freaked out as she was definitely left me a little uneasy. I helped calm her down and then hopped out of the car to take a piss. I know, literally the stupidest move ever, but at the time I hadn't remembered what had happened to me previously, and also I really had to pee. While I was out there, I definitely felt like something was watching me, but I'm generally an anxious person, so I brushed it off, as I was only going to be out there for, 30 seconds. When I stood up and went back to my door, my girlfriend looked absolutely terrified, and she was staring over my shoulder, not at me. My first thought wasn't anything supernatural. We're both girls, so I assumed some creepy rapist had crawled out of the grass and was standing right behind me, waiting to hurt us. When I tell you I flew into the driver's seat, I really mean it. My flight reflex 100% took over. Once I slammed the door, I looked over at her and yelled, "What?" As far as I could tell, there wasn't anyone there. She told me that she had heard faint, female voices coming from the grass, exactly like ours. We were in an open plain, so there was no way it was our echoes. Whatever was out there was mimicking us. The mimicry did it for me, and I knew we had to leave ASAP, especially as I had deciphered my hazy memories of the last time I saw whatever it was. I didn't tell my girlfriend exactly what was wrong, I just turned around so my headlights were on her car so she could get there quickly. Once we were safely away, I called her and told her my thoughts. We're both pretty spooked right now, obviously. What are y'all's thoughts on this? What do you think it was? Furthermore, please let me know if there are any questions I can answer. Husband saw crawler years ago. So a few years ago, my husband was driving home, and it was around probably 10, and he saw something on the side of the road crouched down over a deer, presumably eating it. He shone his headlights on it, and it bolted toward the car and hit it, so my husband left. He said it was gray, skinny, and had long, claw-like fingers. He said it looked exactly like some of the videos I've shown him from the internet. Recently, he heard a weird screeching noise followed by a bubbling/gurgling outside that kept repeating at night and immediately went to investigate until he decided it was really freaky and came inside. Weird things keep happening. Things go missing here, stray cats have gone missing, we live on a cul-de-sac beside a huge empty field with woods, and we've had endless bad luck lately, like beyond what could be deemed coincidental. I'm wondering if this could all be related. If so, we'd like to know what we can do. I was driving home from work. I worked nights on an AF base, and stopped by McDonald's to treat myself after my PT test. I had to drive extremely far from my home to find an open McDonald's at 0214, and when I finally found one, I was 30 minutes from home. After getting my food, I started driving home. The entire way home I felt an extreme existential dread, like something was off about the road I was on, and I felt like I was alone and would never see my wife again. I was on a stretch of highway with trees on both sides and 0 cars passing. After about 10 minutes of driving with no other cars, I saw a stoplight. The light was green, but there was a deer standing under the light. It had been raining, and the puddle under the deer made it look like its legs had another joint where its feet should be and that it was around a foot taller than it should have been. When I drove up on it, I realized it wasn't the reflection and that was just how it was. I went to drive around it, and as soon as my front bumper got past the deer, my radio, that had previously been playing music, blasted static at max volume. I turned the radio off and floored it. When I turned around, the deer that had been previously facing to the right was facing my car, staring at it. I went 20 over the speed limit on the way home, cut through privatized housing, and sped over all the speed bumps in my complex to get inside. By far the scariest thing that's happened to me, but I'm not too scared anymore considering I haven't heard of skinwalkers following people home. This took place a few years ago. I was in my late teens, driving home at 10 p.m. This was a typical shift for me, and I wasn't too tired. I know what I saw. I lived somewhat out in the country, far enough to be on septic, close enough to be on the county's water system. It wasn't irregular to see wildlife at night: elk, deer, barn cats, and even occasionally dogs. I had been living here for a few years at this point. During this specific time, one particular neighbor had a really bad habit of letting his dog run free on the side of the road. I love animals, so I would always pull over, call the number on his collar, and get him back to his owner. Anyways, I'm driving home, nearly 1 block and 3 turns from my house. I see this figure out of the corner of my eye. It looks like a medium-sized dog. I roll down my window, turn my music down, and start calling out to it as I would a dog. "Hey, sweetie. Come here, baby." It seemed very shy, as it wouldn't look at me, and its body language was very timid. I kept trying to speak sweetly to it to let it know I wasn't a threat. It looked a little skinny and seemed to have short, gray hair. I really wanted to see if I could help it. Maybe find its owner or get it somewhere safe and fed. It finally responds to my sweet talk and turns to face me. My stomach dropped. This is going to sound crazy, but it had a human face. The best way I could describe it is like a Teletubby. I really wish there was any other way to describe it for the sake of my credibility. It had no distinctive features, and its head was still shaped like a dog. It didn't make any faces or any noises, and it didn't speak either. I was so surprised that I screamed, "What the duck?" and sped off. I was so scared too because my house had a gate that I had to open, and I didn't know if it was following me or anything. I didn't look back, and it didn't appear to chase after me as I was speeding off. I feel bad about it to this day. I wish I didn't react the way I did, but I didn't know if I was in danger. Seeing something like that, something you can't explain. I don't know. But I really can't stress enough that it did not make any facial expressions, noises, or speech. I was the one going out of my way to bug it, and I was, bluntly, a duck to it. I haven't seen it since. I wish I could change how I reacted, and I really wonder about it all of the time. I did some internet scavenging afterwards, and I haven't been able to find any experiences like it, which really makes me feel nuts. Maybe it was something slightly different than a skinwalker, but this is the closest lore that I know of. Please tell me if any of you have had a similar experience or any questions. Wendigo near Santa Ana Pueblo? I work for a pizza place as a delivery driver. One of the places we deliver to is a hotel on native-owned land. My first time delivering to that location was after dark, and I took a wrong turn and got completely lost on some dirt roads. But while out there, I came across something I've been trying to understand/research ever since. I can sense spiritual things. I sensed a presence following me when I became lost. It felt dark and heavy, but the scariest thing was that I connected to it and could communicate with it psychically. At first it was screaming at me to leave and that I didn't belong there. It sounded like a metal singer screaming high-pitched, but at a lower volume, more like a wispy whisper. It also sounded like multiple voices in unison, and it spoke in the third person, always saying we, never I. I'm still learning how to control this ability without getting scared, and I find that asking questions and learning about it makes me less afraid. I continued to apologize while trying to find my way back to the right road and then also asking it things. I asked why it was there, and it said it had an agreement with the Pueblo leaders to protect the land in exchange for being allowed to be on the land without issue. I asked how it knew who was allowed on the roads I was on, and it answered with talisman, but then showed me a small leather pouch that had silver and turquoise embellishments, something that can fit in your hand, kind of like what I understand to be like a spell bag/medicine bag. I asked how long it had been here, and it said, "We are as old as the earth." I asked if it was a skinwalker, and it said, "We have many names." I asked what it looked like, and it showed me a tall, skinny humanoid creature. The best way I can describe it was similar to the death god in Death Note. It was tall and skinny, had long arms with long, spindly fingers, was slightly hunched over, had a grotesque white humanoid face, like Casper White, not like pale human white, and long, greasy, matted hair, just like the girl from The Grudge. The creature had numerous, razor-sharp teeth, just like the Death Note character. It followed me all the way back to the right road, to the hotel, and then all the way back to the main road after I made my delivery. Tonight I had to go deliver to the hotel again. I had been there many times since the first incident, but today was the first time I noticed it again. This time it was located right next to the hotel. They had music playing on speakers with something that sounded like a flute. I don't know what the instrument is called if not a flute. This time, it didn't feel so dark, instead, it felt content. I got the sense that it was honored by the music, though it didn't speak to me at all this time. When I got out of my car, I felt it recognize me, and it became guarded but still curious. Occasionally I get feelings instead of words and images, so that's how it mostly happened tonight. I started wondering to myself if there was a way to communicate with it intentionally and if there was some kind of peace offering I'd need to bring, and as soon as I thought that, it showed me a piece of rancid steak. I don't actually plan on going there with the intention of connecting to it purposefully, as I feel it is not my culture and would not be a good idea, and I feel like whatever it is should be respected. I'm just curious what this could be, and should I be worried about coming across it again? I thought it might be Wendigo. My curiosity is killing me, and I'd just like to have further understanding so I won't be so scared or at least know if I should avoid doing or thinking anything related to it. I drive for work, and today, I witnessed something that honestly shook me to my core. I'm an avid listener of various creepy storytellers on YouTube, and I've heard stories about people encountering deer that just aren't right and are believed to be skinwalkers in disguise. Now, I've seen deer that have been struck by cars, shot, etc., but this one. It was different. Something about it just made me extremely uneasy, and I regret slowing down to look at it. As I was driving, I saw what I thought was a deer walking across the road. From a distance, it appeared to be just a normal deer, where I live is swarming with them, but, as I drove closer to where it crossed, I saw it walking through a field to my left. I use walking in quotations because I know how a deer walks, trots, runs. But it wasn't moving like a deer. The dark, almost black fur covering its body moved in a manner reminiscent of a rocking horse. Its legs. Jesus, its legs. They moved in exaggerated, spastic ways, not at all in any kind of synchrony. They moved like a spider's legs. Not front to back like a normal deer's gait, no. Out, away from the body, slung high in the air, with random, awkward footfalls. As I slowed down to watch it, I realized what I was looking at, and my blood froze in my veins. Then, it stopped. Facing away from me, I saw its head, as if held up by a string, floppily turned towards my vehicle. Its head came to rest on its back as it looked in my direction, as if it were a puppet that just lost its operator. I don't know whether it was looking at me or my vehicle, but I wasn't about to find out. I sped away, shaking, my brain trying to comprehend what it was I just saw. What the hell did I see? Was it a skinwalker? Some kind of horribly deformed deer? I've never, ever felt such a wave of sickening uneasiness like that before in my life. I know what deer are supposed to look and act like, and whatever that thing was. I don't think it was a deer. My childhood bestie's uncle shared this story at a family gathering in the early 1990s. They were a huge family and always had cookouts and gatherings, often inviting friends from church or work, so there would always be a nice crowd, and sometimes, it went into the evening. This night some of the men there were police officers, so they were trading stories. While the grown-ups were talking, we preteens were sitting nearby talking kid stuff, but I noticed the grown-ups' tones kind of changed, and I turned to listen. So for context, we are a small town, right at the edge of two different tribal reservations. The sheriff's office usually patrolled a 30-minute stretch of reservation that bordered the two different tribal lands. It is a flat forest that is beautiful during the day but scary as hell at night. There is one gas station, grocery and a little community right in the middle of this 30-minute drive. It closes at around 9 p.m. each night. Around 11 p.m. One of the sheriffs got a call over the radio to check something out just south of that community. Now that area was the most isolated, and there were very few people that lived there. There are no streetlights other than some out in the stretch of land where people lived. So this part was a dark area. The officer went out to the area, and I don't remember if he found a problem. My vague memory is thinking it had to do with a fence down, which is bad because some people have herds of sheep, cows, or horses, so that could cause an accident. He took care of business and started back towards our town. He had only driven about a mile back when he saw a man walking on the side of the road. Again, on this stretch of road, it is so dark that even people can be hit by cars, so the officer stopped to at least get the guy home. The man was young and quiet, he had long black hair, and his clothes were old and dirty. Often there are hitchhikers that go from that area to our town to hit the bars and then hitchhike home. But this man was going in the direction towards town, which was weird because it was way past midnight. By now, nothing was open. The officer tried to get the man's address, but the man just said, "Take me down the road, I'll tell you when to stop," and it was toward our town, and the little community was also ahead, so that was probably where he was headed. The sheriff had a truck. When one picks up a hiker, they climb in the back and hit the window when their destination is reached. The officer said, "All right, jump in," and started down the road. While driving, he took a look back and saw the man's black hair. After time was going by and the man wasn't knocking on the window, they passed the community, and the houses were very few again. The officer decided to look back at the man, and he was gone. Now if he was drunk, which he didn't seem to be when they spoke, he was probably passed out and missed his turn. He pulls over, thinking he's going to wake this guy up. However, when he looks back, he finds no one there. The cop is like, "WTF? Tell me he didn't jump out. He's got to be drunk." The cop turns around and tries to backtrack. He passed the community again, but he didn't see anyone lying on the road or sitting or even walking. He turned into the gas station and kind of told the dispatch about it and then decided to just head back to town. While driving, he says that he starts to hear a knocking on the truck. The knocking wasn't coming from the back window, and he double-checked for a passed-out man at the gas station, which had lights despite being closed. The knocking continues, and he keeps driving but starts to look in all his mirrors, and he swears he sees a wolf-like figure at the right side of the truck, running alongside it on hind legs, banging the side by now. He is going 55 to 60 miles per hour at this point, and this creature didn't look like it had any problem running right next to the truck, hitting it. The officer swerved and overcorrected but got control and stopped, but he stopped for a second just to check his doors and get his wits and then hauled ass. He stated that he was going 80 to 90, and the road can be curved, so the speed limit is still 55 miles per hour to this day. He was so terrified, and he was so relieved when he went over the little hill to our town and saw the city lights. I never forgot this story and I drive that road rarely, but never at night. So this happened a couple of years ago, March 24, 2022. I was 16 and had just gotten my license. My friend's family was going on a day trip to the beach, Pacific City, Oregon, and a few of our friends decided since I just got my license and a new-to-me car, we should load up in my old 300ZX, take the T-tops off, and go for a nice trip to the coast. All was going well apart from the discomfort of 4 guys crammed into a small coupe on a 2-hour drive. We eventually made it to the coast and had a good day. After we had packed up our things and started to head home, my friend suggested we take a road he knew, Nestucca Access Road. For anyone familiar with the Tillamook Forest, back home instead of the main highway. It would take about an extra 45 to 60 minutes, but he said it was pretty and would be a nice change in scenery, so I obliged. The sun was setting, and in the thick forest it got dark quickly, and before we knew it, there was no cell service, no houses, and absolutely no cars, which is pretty typical for the mountain ranges between the Oregon coast and the Portland metro area, so it wasn't anything I was worrying about. After about 10 more miles, I saw a green SUV, either a Dodge Durango or a Ford Escape from the early 2000s, hauling a fifth wheel crashed and off the side of the road. Being that no one was around, I decided we should pull over and see if everyone was okay and offer any help we could. It was probably 8 to 10 feet off the road on a slope only caught by the trees it had hit, and the fifth wheel was absolutely trashed. Both of the side walls were caved in with the contents of the RV spread all along the side of the drop-off. Almost all of the windows were shattered. The SUV was filled with clothes and food wrappers, and there were significant bloodstains on the driver's door glass and the windshield, but the severity of the crash didn't seem out of the ordinary. There was no one in or near the car, and a truck had stopped by us, and we told him we didn't see anyone and that we would just be on our way, so he kept driving, and shortly after, we started our journey back on the road. We had to go pretty slow as the condition of the road was getting worse and worse with massive potholes and cracks in the road and definitely was not intended for lower cars. I'd say about 3 to 5 miles after the crash site there was a pretty sharp right-hand turn with a pullover area on the apex of the turn. As my dim headlights lit up the trees behind the pull-off, I saw what looked like a pale man with saggy skin who, from what I could tell, was fully naked but was sort of behind some tall grass/shrubs, so I could really only see up to the bottom of its stomach. It was bald and hunched over like an old man staring at my car. It didn't have prominent features, but the biggest part I remember is its eyes reflected my headlights brightly like a cat's eyes, and its whole body turned to keep looking at the car as we drove by. I was at a loss for what to do or what to think, while my friends in the car were staring back at us, claiming that the object had seemingly leaned out of the shrubs to watch us drive off. We were all freaked out and debating whether it was a tweaker who crashed his car and walked off or a paranormal creature. I played it off as the first option, but the more I thought about it, it seemed like something you'd see in a liminal space or a bad AI-generated image. It had no eyebrows or hair, and its pale white, saggy skin resembled that of a person who has lost hundreds of pounds in a short period of time. However, the skin was saggy on its cheeks, neck, and arms, giving it a scrawny, frail appearance. We sped home, and I kind of just told people the story when the subject of paranormal experiences came up. About July of 2023, my at the time girlfriend's brother and I were pretty close, and so he, his friend, and I were up driving through the trails of Dixie Mountain talking ghost stories and such when I told them this story. Her brother's friend said he'd seen the same crash and showed me a picture of the same SUV I saw, but he said he didn't see anything creepy. I don't know what I saw or what happened, but it definitely scared me and my friends, and I've never been back on that road since that day. Maybe someone has seen or had a similar experience in the Oregon wilderness. I hadn't thought about sharing my story until today when my partner and I were reading a book about cryptozoology and mythological creatures, which reminded me of my experience. Thanks for listening. Gunnison National Forest sighting. On December 21, 2024 at approximately 3:30 p.m., my girlfriend and I were driving south on North State Highway 135. We were on our way back from Crested Butte Ski Resort, and we had just passed the entrance to the Roaring Judy Fish Hatchery. As I was looking out the window at the East River, Gunnison River, and wooded area that runs alongside the road, on our right side heading south, I noticed a figure standing next to a tree in the marsh or water. I couldn't exactly tell. This figure was what I estimated to be about 7 to 7.5 feet tall. It was about 75 meters from the road, and I could clearly see a head, 2 shoulders, and arms hanging down to below the waist. Below that, I believe it was in the water or in the marsh. The figure was entirely black with no variation in color, and it didn't appear that it was clothing. I also believe it was facing away from me, looking towards the opposite direction. It was not moving and was standing entirely straight up from what I could see. At this point I said to my girlfriend that I either saw a very tall person standing out in the water/woods or that it was a Bigfoot. I convinced her to turn around and try to locate exactly where I saw it so we could pull the car over and look. After going back, we stopped for a few minutes, but I couldn't figure out the exact location where I saw it, and it wasn't safe to be stopped on the side of the road with a small shoulder. There was one small house about a minute down from where I saw it that appeared to be abandoned, and there were no cars parked or people walking in that area from what we could see. There was also at least about a foot of snow, and it was 20 degrees out. On our way back, I then Googled Gunnison National Forest Bigfoot, and the very first thing that popped up was a sighting in almost the same area with the exact same description as I had seen. In my opinion, I believe I saw a Bigfoot that was ironically standing in the water right next to a fish hatchery looking for its dinner. I can't think of a reason that someone would be standing in that water. And I did not see a fishing pole. I couldn't make out any features. Only the height, stature, long arms, and solid black color on its whole body. Please let me know what you all think. I understand there is not a lot of detail, but this is the information I can provide from the 5 seconds I observed this thing. Sounds in northern Michigan. I'm writing to share my story about an unusual sound I heard in northern Michigan at Wilderness State Park in October 2016. This story is 100% factual and told to the best of my recollection. I'm curious to hear from both believers and skeptics who might have an idea of what I heard. I've thought about this pretty much every day since and am now scared/cautious/respectful of the woods. I grew up in northern New Mexico and went on annual camping trips to Colorado, Utah, and northern New Mexico. I spent a lot of time outside and grew up on a very rural property, and as such, I am pretty familiar with most desert wild animal noises, including coyotes. I moved to Michigan for graduate school and was 32 when this happened. In 2016, I got really into photographing the northern lights, and I was driving with my girlfriend at the time from central Michigan to northern lower Michigan, Traverse City, Mackinac City. We decided to try camping to save on hotel costs, and I booked a campsite, not realizing how late in the season it was, at Wilderness State Park. We ended up arriving very late, maybe around 11 p.m. We ended up breaking up a few months later and weren't getting along, and we promptly got into a huge fight at the campsite when my girlfriend refused to help me set up camp. I decided that we would just go back home and started driving us out of the park, all while still arguing. I ended up getting good and lost in the process of trying to leave, and we ended up driving around for about 1.5 hours. I'm not really sure how that was possible given the size of the park's roads. It seems like we should have run back into the road, but the point is I was super turned around. A couple of times the arguing with my GF was so irritating I stopped the car, got out, slammed the door, and stormed off down the road. The final time I did this, I stopped by a stop sign and walked maybe 1/4 of a mile down a dark road by some marshy areas, being quiet while my girlfriend yelled after me. It was very dark, and I was intentionally walking fast so she'd lose sight of me. At some point I decided to start yelling back some asinine things at whatever she was yelling at me and turned back and walked down this same road pretty much yelling the whole time, so lots of car doors slamming, too high-pitched / female sounding voices, and us having done this at a couple of locations around the park while then being relatively silent. We were in a Prius, while traveling in between locations. So as I walk back down this road and am yelling at / with my girlfriend again, I hear what sounds like a loon, a coyote howl. Two human voices are yelling in an indecipherable language. Ape / chimp / monkey chatter sounds. Back to a coyote howl. Ending in a long ooh, that sounds a lot like a Finding Bigfoot type call. All of these sounds happen right after each other, continuously, and at the same volume and from the same direction, with the exception of the human-sounding voices and the chimp-sounding noises, which it was impossible to tell if it was one or two voices making the sounds. My ex thinks it was two voices those times. I think it was the same voice. Each noise sounded like what I described above, but for the sounds of the loon and the coyote, they sounded slightly off compared to other calls I've heard. Other than this series of sounds, which lasted maybe 30 seconds or 45 seconds, it had been quiet, i.e., we weren't hearing loons, coyotes, people, or anything else either before or after this. At the time we were so busy arguing that neither of us even stopped our argument to remark on the sounds. It took me about another 40 minutes to find the highway, and it was when we were about 30 minutes down the main highway that we had stopped arguing and I brought up the sounds. We both described what we heard and were shocked when we Googled that some folks think Bigfoot's mimic calls and that Wilderness State Park has had previous sightings. We ended up going back to the campsite, setting up camp, and cooking a steak in the middle of the night because we were starving, and I have a lot of food allergies that make eating most regular foods impossible, so I always have to cook. While the call hadn't been scary, more inquiring if I had to name it, I was really uncomfortable the rest of the night in the camp and didn't sleep. The next day I got increasingly anxious until about 3 p.m., when I insisted we break down camp as fast as possible and get out of there. We were the only tent at the campsite, but I felt panicked because there were a few RVs there. It got so bad that I almost left the brand new camping equipment we'd purchased for this trip. During this time of packing up the camp, one of our dogs got increasingly agitated and had to be put in the car, where he uncharacteristically barked quite seriously and intently out the window continuously until we left. Our other dog, a puppy at the time, was uncharacteristically quiet. We left without further incident and returned all the camping gear. Since then, I've wanted to go camping but have been too scared, especially now that I live in the PNW. Any thoughts on what this might have been? Is there any animal in northern me capable of producing sounds like monkeys chattering or human teens yelling in language? I haven't told very many people about this event, and even as someone who was pretty open-minded, I found this to be more jarring than I might have expected. We had our up-close sighting in Big Sur, California, in 1978. I've only shared this experience with family and friends. After stumbling across this and a few other Bigfoot stories here, I've decided to share this experience. Big Sur is a mountainous area in south-central California situated on the edge of the Los Padres National Forest, which is almost 3,000 square miles large, and overlooking the Pacific Ocean on the western side. 3 friends and I, ranging from 16 to 18, who lived in nearby Salinas, had intended to drive to a secluded spot in Big Sur that we called Top of the World. This particular area of Big Sur wasn't frequented by people except for some occasional vehicle traffic from locals or the rare tourist or hiker during the day, and was void of humans at night. At night there were, of course, critters, bobcat, fox, and even the occasional mountain lion. No people, no cops, Perfect location for 4 party animals. We drove down the Pacific Coast Highway and turned off on the Old Coast Road, which winds up into the mountains. The Old Coast Road is a hard-packed dirt road and former primary route in and out of Big Sur prior to the construction of the Bixby Bridge. Our spot, the top of the world, was right off and above the dirt road with an amazing view of the Pacific Ocean. The spot was directly accessible from the old dirt road, which had steep cliffs on one side and on the other a very deep ravine with the Bixby Creek, or Little Sur River, I don't remember, running through it. Well, the party never even started because of the event I will now describe. I might add that the events of this night are burned into my memory. It was almost traumatic. With the exception of some exact conversation, I remember everything like it was yesterday. Steve parked his mom's Chevy Vega at the base of the incline leading to our spot, grabbed some beers out of the hatchback, which we left open, and walked halfway up the very steep incline. Steve parked his car about 30 yards from the top of the hill. What happened next all took place in a matter of seconds, but it seemed like an eternity to me. We were sitting next to each other in a row facing the Pacific Ocean. Behind us was the crest of the hill, about 15 yards up. Beyond that, the forest was dark and foreboding. Looking out at the Pacific, talking little and just taking in the beautiful view whilst sipping our beers, we got quiet and maybe a bit reflective. I know I did. It was beautiful. At one point, in the midst of silence, something weird happened. Later, when all this was over, we talked about this strange feeling that none of us had ever experienced. What happened was this: all of a sudden, we all looked at each other, and without speaking a word, as if every one of us was receiving an unspoken message, or intuitive response to nature, or a gut feeling, we simultaneously looked around behind us. At the top of the hill, this is what we saw. There, at the top, not 15 yards away, was a creature. It was simply us standing there, observing. I will try my best to describe what I, and we, saw, although it was almost midnight, which added to the creep factor, and our eyes were well acclimated to darkness by then. This being was not human. I am certain of that. It just stood there, completely upright, arms to the side, facing in our direction. Whether or not it was looking at us, I couldn't tell because, unfortunately, due to lighting conditions and the angle, I guess, I saw only the outline of a head and body, a very hairy head and body that was dark in color. I was unable to recall any facial features. There was very long hair, fur, flowing down from the head, but there was an opening where a face must have been. All I saw was darkness between the hair on the head. There were no eyes or other facial features visible. The head hair seemed to flow down and mix with the rest of the hairy body. I distinctly remember the arms. They were long but seemed to fit the size of the body. I don't recall their arms being overly long like an ape's, but they had long, flowing hair on them, as did the torso and legs. It was tall, maybe 7 feet, but that could have been because we were looking up at it. It was also wide. It gave me the impression of great strength. It made absolutely no sound. To be fair, I soaked all this information up in probably about 1 or 2 seconds. The reason was that an immediate feeling of fight or flight kicked in as soon as we, turned and saw this creature. Anyone who has experienced combat or other life-threatening situations understands the significance of this decision. Fight wasn't an option, obviously, so we did, once again simultaneously, what most humans would do: get the F out of Dodge. We ran. I stumbled and fell because of the steep incline, and the guys made it to the car before me. I didn't even try to get in, rather, I simply jumped into the open hatchback. Steve started the Vega and gunned it. We only got 2 corners away from Mr. Foot before Steve lost control and we went sliding over the side of a cliff. Thankfully, the first 20 yards of the drop were gradual and overgrown with thick underbrush that slowed the car to a stop before dropping off the steep cliff and into the creek below. We all climbed out, thanking our luck, and climbed back up to the road. Now we had to make a choice. Walking back in the direction we came would be only 3 miles or so back to Highway 1, the Pacific Coast Highway. But that direction would also take us by the last place we saw Mr. Foot. The unanimous decision was to walk the other direction, which was 5x as long to reach the highway. That's how scared we were. It took hours, but we made it, alive and healthy, with a story we could share with friends and family for the rest of our lives. One night in September 2005, I was driving home from work, around 11:30 p.m. I was a waitress at a golf course in a fairly rural area of Michigan, thus, the shortest distance between work and home was all back roads. As I turned onto the road that I lived on, I saw what I thought was a bear. It was digging through the trash that had been set out in front of a house with a long driveway. It was most likely the length of the driveway that had caused the owner to set up a yard light, which was directly above the bear. I was initially excited. I had grown up in the area, and people often swore there were bears, but I had never gotten to see one. Plus, it just so happened to be under the only light on that road. As my car slowed to a stop, I realized immediately it wasn't a bear. Although I wasn't yet afraid, the bear's shape was completely different from what I expected. Plus the fur was short and shiny, like a horse's or a Doberman's. As the car rolled to a stop, I had already seen enough to know it wasn't a bear, or a canine, or even a cat or a deer. It was shaped all wrong. It was hugely muscled. As it dug, I could see the muscles moving in its strangely humanoid shoulders. I am very confused by now, but I am still expecting to have a lightbulb realization. It was huge, the shoulders very human and strong, but it hadn't looked up yet, so I just kept staring, figuring my eyes were playing tricks on me. I had been at a full stop for less than 10 seconds, surely, before it finally looked up, and it was like time stopped. This is the part of the story I hate to tell for two reasons. 1, even after all this time I still get goosebumps when I think about it, and 2, I know it sounds crazy. The face was hideous, blood-chilling, and terror-inducing. It wasn't flat like a man's but not long like a dog's either. It had some sort of an elongated face and a flattened, pushed-up nose, and eyes that glowed red with what I swear was their own light, not reflected light. The only light source was my headlights, which were pointed at the road and the yard light above it, and the glow wasn't your standard animal eye shine. It was like the color of a hot electric burner. The mouth was by far the worst of it. It was massive, think anglerfish style, only the teeth were larger, broader, and weirdly shiny, almost metal looking. I simply gazed at it, compelled to continue gazing, aware that I would soon come to the realization that it was either a mask or a figment of the light. Then it started to stand, bipedal like a man. It opened that terrifying mouth in what was clearly an act of aggression, and I floored it. My car fishtailed, and I had a moment of terror as I realized if I went in the ditch, it would be just me and the werewolf. Thankfully, I got it under control and didn't look back. Werewolf was what my brain was screaming, but I'm not sure. Michigan is dogman country, but no one has ever described him as having a pushed-in nose and a mouth like an anglerfish full of shiny teeth. When I got home, just 2 miles away, I drove my car directly up to my porch steps and bolted inside. Thankfully I have since left the state and have never seen anything like it again. So was this the dog man or something else? So my boyfriend and I go on drives a lot. It was 9 p.m., so there was no way this could be sleep deprivation. I'm thinking it was a shapeshifter because something seemed off about it. We drove from Spokane, WA, to Long Lake, Washington. Basically on the line of reservation land. It was a nice 2-hour-long drive. We wanted to see a new area. Well, we are driving, looking at the scenery and stuff because it looks pretty. Well, we see what looks like a big dog standing on the side of the road, but we get close, and it gets smaller, from the size of a Great Dane to a German Shepherd. Kind of weird, but alright. We slowed so the dog could pass the road, about 5 miles per hour, otherwise, I'd flip my shit. You go slow around doggos, but it just stood there, staring at us. I wanted to see if it had a collar, something I've done plenty of times, but when I went to open my door, all my reflexes screamed at me to just go. I told my boyfriend to floor it, and when I looked behind, the dog was still there. Normal dogs would have been spooked and run off, but I've seen some weird dogs that haven't. The thing that got me was this dog's eyes were oddly reflective, like a cat's. I've owned dogs, and eyes can be reflective, but not to this extent. I just find it really weird that my body froze as I was staring at this dog through my car window. It could have just been a weird dog, but my physical being tells me otherwise. This happened to me last August, when I was driving down from Washington to San Diego with some friends. The 3 of us were camping in cool spots along the way, and at one point during our trip we stopped to camp for a night near the Sierra Nevada mountains. My friend had heard that the sunrise's reflection over the mountains is beautiful, so we decided to wake up around 5 a.m. the next morning to watch. That time came, and we reluctantly left our tent and walked about 10 minutes from our, pretty remote, campsite over to a long road and stretch of desert with a great view of the mountains. We stood there for about 20 minutes. Then, as I was looking across the distance, something caught my eye. It appeared to be an animal of some sort, but it was unusually large and extremely white. At first I thought it was a bunny, but then decided that there was no way, as it was way too large for that. The figure, possibly the size of a large dog, was bright white in color and moved in an unnatural manner, characterized by jerky movements and rapid speed. I remember the face being really weird, kind of indescribable. It gave me goosebumps as I stared at it, trying to figure out what I was seeing. I looked over to my friends and asked them if they were seeing the thing that I had described. When I looked back, I couldn't see it anymore. Neither of my friends had seen this figure, but they shared a look, and one of them did a motion like two fingers walking on his arm. The other nodded, and they told me they didn't know what it was, but we should just go back to our campsite. Following that experience, I repeatedly inquired about the information they were withholding from me. I thought they were playing a joke on me, but I was still persistent with my questions. They told me to drop it until we made it to San Diego and promised they would explain it when we got there. A few days later, as we drove into San Diego late at night, I mentioned it again. That's when I learned about the Skinwalker for the first time. They told me they had read stories that sounded exactly like what I saw and noted how strange it was that I described the figure in such a way without ever having heard of the Skinwalker before. I was so freaked out, and I was glad they waited to tell me. They told me that they waited to share because they didn't want to risk anything by thinking or talking about it. I'm uncertain whether I actually saw the Skinwalker that day, or if my tired eyes were deceiving me. I'm definitely not eager to return to the area anytime soon, though. My skeptical husband had a bizarre experience but refuses to acknowledge it was anything strange. My husband comes from a long line of outdoorsmen, hunters, fishers, etc. He spends every weekend out exploring the land and also grew up in a dense forest. He is a proud skeptic, an actual earth scientist by profession. He doesn't believe in anything unless there's evidence to back it up. He says that having grown up in the woods for over 4 decades, if any of these things existed, he would have seen something by now. He told me about an experience he had forgotten about last night while he was out in a national forest an hour north of us. He saw a strange group of 3 deer. The deers had long, bony, skinny bodies with weird, elongated legs and wolf tails. He said the tail part was so bizarre, strangely long and almost as long as their whole body, bushy, just like an extra long German Shepherd tail. He said the deer bodies didn't look right, really gangly and disproportioned, but couldn't put his finger on what was so strange about them. The tail was what stood out most. We then Googled deer species in the area together, and nothing matched the description. There are some deer with longer tails, but they don't exist in our area, and their tails are not bushy and long like a dog's tail. They're trim and stubby, like a regular deer tail, just elongated. Basically, no such creature exists in our area or anywhere else. He said he saw them once and some time later saw them again. They were not moving, just watching him. Nothing else out of the ordinary had happened this day. The first thought in my mind was shapeshifter/skinwalker/dogman. There are many accounts of weird half-deer creatures associated with shapeshifter or dogman encounters. The thing is, he has had paranormal encounters but refuses to accept it was something out of the ordinary. He was in the middle of nowhere at night when a giant, completely black craft flew straight over him, covering the sky, making a weird, low, pulsating sound, like a pulsating electric hum. He thinks it was just an experimental aircraft and didn't think anything of it. Another time, he was driving an isolated country road at night, and he and his passenger saw a very bright orange orb in the sky, moving around. Suddenly, a cow appeared in the middle of the road out of nowhere, and they almost hit it. Once again, he assumes it was a planet he saw, and the cow had quickly run onto the road when they weren't looking. Another time, he saw a pair of yellow/green glowing eyes watching him from the darkness, pretty high up, 7-ish feet, accompanied by someone whistling what he said was an eerie tune. This encounter is the only weird one he will admit to, as he felt uneasy and ran back to find his car. This took place by a pond or body of water. Regarding the strange wolf deer, does this sound familiar to anyone? Have they had an experience like that or heard about it from any other encounter videos/stories? It seemed pretty strange to me, and my husband, who can properly identify any common animal, was very perplexed, as he's never seen anything like it in the area or in any wildlife book, period. He thinks it's nothing, but I definitely don't. Driving through southeastern Kentucky around Clarksville, Tennessee, kind of. Friend was driving on extremely remote back roads around midnight when something came straight from the darkness and made a beeline at the car. Literally, it lunged straight for the front right passenger tire and wanted to get hit by our car. Then, as the driver swerved, it cut forward and ran with our car for a few seconds as it outpaced our vehicle, going around 30/40ths of a mile per hour, and then suddenly disappeared back into the darkness. It describes it as a human-shaped creature wearing a fur suit with extremely long, straight brown hair like a human. Please let me know what you think. We are driving through the night and bugging out. Back in high school, my friends and I would go ghost hunting. I live in Lincoln, Nebraska, on the weekends by driving for miles outside of city limits until the roads turned into minimum maintenance roads. On one such journey, in my mom's Ford Explorer, we had the car break down on us in the middle of nowhere, miles from city limits. We all saw the mooing cows on either side of the fence as soon as we got out of the cars. We thought they were hungry. This was around 2005, so cell phone reception was not the best outside city limits, where we were. We had finally gotten a hold of one of our friends to come and get us and also arranged for a tow truck to come get the car. Unbeknownst to our friend we first contacted, thanks to crummy reception and roaming cell phones, my mom came out and picked all of us up. By the time she had gotten to us, the cows were on either side of the fence, circling us, only divided by the road we were on. Meanwhile, our friend was driving out to our location, again not knowing we had been picked up, when she spotted something dark, large, and running very fast out in the fields, Nebraska, so lots of flat land, which made her really uncomfortable. She noticed this figure getting closer as she approached our location and decided to turn around and go back home. She was getting spooked. As she was driving back, going around 55 miles per hour, a large black figure jumped from the ditch on the side of the road, hit the side of her car, got up, jumped the fence, and ran away. She said it had a black tail and teeth like a wolf. It left tufts of hair in her car door. I don't know if she ever sent it anywhere to be tested. But I saw the hair. What really freaked me out, too, was that I had another friend, who didn't even know this other girl, tell me a story of a very similar figure they saw running out in the fields a few weeks prior. She said they could see it running, keeping up with their car, and then, I can't remember the order, but I believe this was it, it went from running on 2 legs to 4 and just sped off in front of them. Well, it was to their side out in a field. I have always wondered what this was and have never been able to get a good explanation. Then I stumbled upon this channel today, and holy shit, does it sound like the creature my friend saw. I can't wait to listen more and would love any additional info if anyone felt inclined to share. A girlfriend and I were driving to Arizona. We got out of Albuquerque, heading down Route 60, I believe. I think it was a 1-lane stretch of highway on the way to Prescott, Arizona, but I'm not sure since it was a while ago. It was right before dusk, and we were in the middle of nowhere. While driving, we saw a human-like figure, super tall and massive, off to the side of the highway, just standing there. It was probably a little over 100 feet ahead. My girlfriend stops the car. She thought it could be a person who needed help, but once we stopped the car, she realized, like I did, that it wasn't. We were terrified. I never believed in Bigfoot. I thought the idea was adorable but never really thought it was legit until this day. We were both panic-stricken. We locked the car doors. I asked her to drive. Go now. She was paralyzed by fear. We watched as this thing cleared the highway in 4 or 5 steps. A human would have had to take at least 15, but not this thing. It was massive. Its big arms were swaying as it walked. When it crossed the road, there was a ravine, and we couldn't see where it went, so I again told her to drive. We didn't have eyes on it after it crossed the highway, and after watching that, it could have come up on us super quick. We bolted as fast as her little Honda could go. When we passed the part where he had crossed, he was nowhere to be found. We both just shook our heads in disbelief and almost simultaneously said, Bigfoot. I have no doubts in my mind that it was in fact Bigfoot. Not sure if what I saw was a Wendigo/Skinwalker. So last night my friend contacted me as he needed a ride home from work, and I was the only one available to do so. Initially his dad was going to give him a ride, but he had an unexpected work emergency come up, so I was his last shot before asking a coworker. He hates asking people he doesn't know closely for things. We live in MN, so being it was already 9:30 p.m. when he called me, it was dark outside at that point. Now when I say that we live in MN, I don't mean like way up north in the absolute middle of nowhere, but we live about halfway between St. Cloud and Minneapolis. The drive to pick him up was pretty uneventful as I took County Road 10 from where I live to pick him up. Anyone who lives in MN knows that this road is basically a highway for rural, smallish towns. I picked him up from the gas station he works at and started the trip to bring him home. Now, my friend, I'll just refer to him as Jay so as not to include any direct names, he lives out in one of the townships in Minnesota. This means that for the most part there are mostly either large pastures, as there are lots of farms in these areas, or woods, not much in between. This also means that Jay's house is for the most part in the middle of nowhere, and so are the backroads you need to take to get there. These backroads mean that there's just enough space on the road for 2 cars and a bit more road on each side for rumble strips to wake anyone who may fall asleep at the wheel before either a bunch of gravel/grass that leads to a ditch and then finally woods or aforementioned pastures. I had my high beams on, as there are lots of deer and other wildlife out this time of year, so I wanted to see them before it's too late and they total my car. About halfway into the drive, I saw the outline of something in the middle of the road. I assumed this to be a deer, so I slowed down in order to avoid hitting it. Upon coming closer to the figure, however, I saw that it began to resemble a coyote more. This wasn't surprising to me, though, as there are lots of those in MN, they're like rats with how many of them there are. As we came closer to the figure, I got a really uncomfortable feeling as the coyote was refusing to move out of the middle of the road. Another reason that I felt uncomfortable was that while it did look like a coyote, it was just off looking. Now I know how coyotes look. I was in Boy Scouts from kindergarten to 7th grade, and we'd seen plenty while being out camping. But this one, its front and hind legs were about 1.5 sizes too long, its torso was also oversized, and its neck was too long. To top this all off, it was also overly bony and looked like it hadn't eaten in weeks. This is very concerning, as there are plenty of small game that coyotes can feed on in this area. Already I wanted to be out of this place just by the way the thing looked and the fact that it didn't take off immediately upon the car getting close to it. I really didn't feel like dealing with a rabid coyote. Now, to get into the thing that unsettled me the most, as I drove slightly off of the road to go around the thing, I swear the thing looked straight at both of us. I know I wasn't the only one who felt this, as Jay spoke up, kinda looks like it's staring at us, and gave a slight, uneasy chuckle. Now when I say that it looked at us, I don't mean it looked at the car but seemed to lock eye contact with us. Even more unsettling is that its eyes weren't yellow like a typical coyote's but were green and looked extremely bloodshot. After getting around it, I took off as fast as I could and finished bringing Jay home. He, of course, joked around and said things like, "Ooh, maybe it was a skinwalker," and laughed at how freaked out I was. The thing is, though, this isn't the only time I've had an experience just like this, as I had another situation when I was driving home from Alexandria around 11 p.m., which I just shrugged off as it probably being a rabid coyote. But after last night, I'm 99% positive that that thing was not just a rabid coyote. I know I'm probably just letting my imagination get the best of me, but the fact that I've had something incredibly similar to this happen in the past makes me think that maybe it's not just a coincidence. Feel free to let me know what all of you think, as I'd really like to get more people's input on this and want to make sure I'm not just going crazy. Nonetheless, I think I'm going to try and avoid backroads as much as I can for the next few months here. Who knows? Maybe it'll have followed me now that I'm talking about it, and I'll have more stories in the near future. Whatever could this be? Still haunts me to this day. I grew up in a small town in Arkansas. We used to visit my uncle, who lived 30 to 45 minutes from our place. He lived with other family members on roughly 60 acres of land, accessible via a barely paved road that turned into endless potholes as you approached the gate to his driveway. It was really in bumduck nowhere with very few neighbors around. Not sure if this matters, but I grew up Catholic. I'm agnostic now but never felt or believed in Catholicism, and my family has always been very superstitious, more so with angels, demons, and ghosts versus creatures. Okay, back to my memories. We would frequent it often. And it didn't matter what time of day it was because as soon as we reached the section of road that turns into jagged potholes, it would start. This stretch of road always took the longest since you had to drive so slow, and rows of trees leading to forest areas line this road. During this time, I would always feel the need to move to the middle seat. I always sat in the back, and slumped down. Our car was an old station wagon that had lots of visibility. I felt like I was in a glass house. It was a sickening feeling that would wash over me, the feeling you get when you're being watched. And I think we were. I never saw an actual creature per se, but I would frequently see branches move and shift as if they were popping up from someone hopping off them or forcefully moving them, but nothing was there. We had coyotes, raccoons, goats, stray dogs, and standard wildlife you can think of, but I never saw anything. Ever. One night, we are inching our way to his house. I get the feeling again and am scared. I'm probably in my early teen or preteen years. I got the notion that I should turn and look into the tree line. There, as I stared, I saw two yellow or reflective eyes staring back at me, maybe 6 to 8 feet above the ground amongst the trees. After what felt like hours of not blinking, I held its gaze as it sidestepped out of sight behind a tree. The figure was hard to make out, but its dark, shadow-like appearance made it seem broad and awkward, too unnatural to be human. I slumped lower, but no one believed me. From then on I frequently would see this thing, and sometimes what seemed like more than one with similar behavior, when we drove by. It felt like it was stalking us sometimes, following the car up the road. If I felt brave and looked back, I saw a dark figure sometimes upright on 2 feet but sometimes down on all fours shuffle across the road. Sometimes it would get close to the car. I looked back once and saw the taillights reflect and dim as something just below the back windshield moved past it. There was a thud against the car or an occasional rock thrown, often not hard, and it had a different sound, like it was purposefully thrown versus gravel getting kicked up. Only once did a rock come from the darkness ahead of us and crack the windshield. My mom popped on the high beams, but there wasn't anything there, just movement in the trees. Her reflexes were very fast turning on that light, so I don't think a local teen or neighbor was playing a stupid prank and would have time to dart out of the way, as they would land on barbed wire that was also on both sides of that road. I hated when I got older and was sent out of the car to be the one who opens the gate. That was when I felt close to maybe being attacked. Once we got to the house, though, I felt safe. My uncle was a former vet and avid historian and gun collector. He wasn't superstitious, but he was the only one who would hear me out. His property was fenced off, one fence around the house itself with a decent spanning backyard, and then fenced again around that for goats and cows he raised. I never liked going outside at night because I felt eyes on me, and it was always eerily too quiet. It made you feel like you would never be happy or sleep again. No bugs humming, just silence with the occasional bee or moo. Sometimes weird booms or snaps happened, and we would investigate, and the scenes looked like a bear or something came through there, but there aren't bears in the area, and sometimes large branches were found broken or snapped and in unnatural positions or far from their tree. I've no clue what these things could have been. No Indian burial grounds, landlocked, no lakes or mountains, though heavily rocky terrain. Maybe some rumored Indian settlements in the past, but not sure. I haven't been back in years. Weirdness on the road. It's been 20 years since this experience, and it's only really come back to me because it was the 20th anniversary get-together. There is a 6-lane highway between Kuwait and Iraq, formerly known as Highway 80. It runs from Kuwait City to the border town of Safwan in Iraq and then on to the Iraqi city of Basra. The road was used by Iraqi armored divisions for the 1990 invasion of Kuwait. It was repaired after the Gulf War and used by US and British forces in the initial stages of the 2003 invasion of Iraq. During the Persian Gulf War, American, Canadian, British, and French aircraft and ground forces attacked retreating Iraqi military personnel attempting to leave Kuwait on the night of February 26 to 27, 1991, resulting in the destruction of hundreds of vehicles and the deaths of many of their occupants. Between 1,400 and 2,000 vehicles were hit or abandoned on the main Highway 80 north of Al Jarrah. Some of the vehicles were still in the desert, and you could still find bits of equipment like webbing and helmets out in the sand when you were carrying out your 5 and 20 checks when your convoy stopped. There was always a weird feeling on that road at night. On one evening, we were the last packet in the convoy heading to Basra. We had the recovery vehicles and were tasked with the recovery of a broken down vehicle. We rolled up to the site of the breakdown, and as the recovery team started work, we put out a security cordon. Night vision can really mess up your depth perception sometimes, but you could make out what looked like figures moving on the desert just beyond the cordon. In usual fashion, a squad was sent out to see what exactly was happening and if it was a possible threat, so off the 4 of us went into the dark desert. We received a stop order over the PRR, personal radio, due to our proximity to the suspected individuals. There was nothing that we could see, so we carried out our 5 and 20 checks, and beneath the sand we discovered a pile of rags and 3 helmets. Having established there was no apparent threat, we returned back to the cordon, but over the next 30 to 40 minutes, as we watched out into the desert, there were many times that there looked like there were solid figures moving around the perimeter. Now if this was a one-off event, I would have put it down to lack of sleep, too much caffeine, or using night vision. But over the years since, others from different units have talked about the figures in the desert that always seemed to be moving around but could never be found, even though they had worked in that area at different times. On the night of February 26 to 27, 1991, for the next 10 hours, scores of U.S. Marine, U.S. Air Force, and U.S. Navy aircraft from USS Ranger, CV/CVA-61, attacked the convoy using various weapons. Vehicles surviving the air attacks were later engaged by arriving coalition ground units, while most of the vehicles that managed to evade the traffic jam and continued to drive on the road north were targeted individually. The road bottleneck near the Mutla Ridge police station was reduced to a long, uninterrupted line of more than 300 stuck and abandoned vehicles, sometimes called the Mile of Death. The wreckage found on the highway consisted of at least 28 tanks and other armored vehicles, with many more commandeered civilian cars and buses filled with stolen Kuwaiti property. The death toll from the attack remains unknown. British journalist Robert Fisk said he lost count of the Iraqi corpses crammed into the smoldering wreckage or slumped face down in the sand at the main site, and saw hundreds of corpses strewn up the road all the way to the Iraqi border. American journalist Bob Drogan reported seeing scores of dead soldiers in and around the vehicles, mangled and bloated in the drifting desert sands. A 2003 study by the Project on Defense Alternatives, PDA, estimated fewer than 10,000 people rode in the cut-off Maine caravan, and when the bombing started, most simply left their vehicles to escape through the desert or into the nearby swamps, where some died from their wounds. I believe that at times, we may have encountered some of the Iraqi soldiers who were fleeing. Strange events, phantom roads and disappearing memories, occurred in Kanawha, Oklahoma. I hope someone who can get through the whole thing can help me understand what happened. I have started and stopped 6 times now, trying to tell my story of a glitch that happened to my boyfriend and me several years ago. This isn't like any other glitch I've experienced before, and believe me, I have had my share. This experience happened to my boyfriend, Randall, and me on a narrow, winding red dirt road coming down from the top of a hill where Sacred Heart Church and Cemetery are located. You may have heard of this place, as many websites and videos tell of hauntings and scary things people saw and heard at night while exploring this sacred ground. For me, the Sacred Heart is a place of reverence for the people who lived, worshipped, served, and died there. The gravestones tell the story, and my family name is known to that story. I had never known about the reports of hauntings until I sat down to type this. I googled Kanawha, Oklahoma, because I wasn't sure if this area of Oklahoma is in the Cookson Hills region. I was shocked to see so much online about the hauntings. I have family who still live near Sacred Heart, and no one has ever mentioned anything about spirits and paranormal events. Then again, I can understand why they wouldn't. I don't want to feed the fires of those who would traipse around my grandparents' and my ancestors' graves in search of spirits and spooky stuff. Some people speak of satanic rituals being done there. If there are any satanic rituals being practiced there, I can promise you that those who participate are sadly misguided, and my ancestors wish they would go and leave them in peace. And so do I. I'll tell my glitch story, but don't think for a second that the irony escapes me. I am quite aware that my story will most likely serve to confirm what others have claimed after visiting Sacred Heart Church in Kanawha, Oklahoma. But it's the truth. So be it. Randall and I drove to Oklahoma to meet up with my mother, who was driving up from Texas. All that I can remember of this meeting is what happened at a gas station somewhere between Stillwell and Kanawha. I don't remember why we met my mother there, I only remember that we did. I know I was wearing a white tank top that had Bahamas on the front, jean shorts, and flip-flops. Randall was in jeans and a Raiders jersey. I don't know where we went after meeting Mom. I can only remember the next day when Randall and I set out to find Sacred Heart Church with directions given to us by Mom. Here is what she wrote. Turn right out onto this highway and go 11 miles. After 4 miles, turn left onto a blacktop road. You will cross over 2 creek bridges, and immediately after the second bridge, you'll take a left. It's going to be right after a pecan tree farm sign on your right side. It's a red dirt road. Stay on that road for 5 miles, and you will run right into the gates to Sacred Heart. It's on the top of a hill. Mother left to go to my aunt's house, and we left about an hour later, headed to Sacred Heart. We followed Mom's directions, and everything she said about what we would see was correct to the letter. After the second bridge, we turned left. Or we started to anyway. This was not a red dirt road. It was an access way for farmers and their machinery. A cornfield. There was no red dirt present. Okay, we must have turned too soon. We headed back down that blacktop, and there were no more left turns. The road teed off to go left or right, but there was no dirt road. We must have driven around for 2 hours, looking for that road. It was not there. Finally, we called my aunt's house, and she sent someone in an old Ford truck to lead us to her house, and then we all went to the church. This time it wasn't back roads and blacktops. We took the highway almost all the way there. I have no recollection whatsoever of the rest of the day. I don't remember who we saw, why we were even there, or what we did. I only recall Mom saying she'd take us back to where we started that morning. She was driving like a bat out of hell, dust flying, rocks flying, barreling down this winding, narrow, rutted out red dirt road. It seemed like we had gone 20 miles when, ahead of us, Mom slowed down and her right turn signal came on. We slowed, she stopped, we stopped, and there it was. It hit us both like a ton of bricks. We were at the same blacktop road that we had driven back and forth on so many times, looking for a left turn on a dirt road. We were staring out at the bridge, the blackjack trees, and the sign about pecan farms, just like we had seen earlier. I know we were both trying to solve it in our heads, but neither one of us could speak. It was stunning. Finally I looked at Randall and said, "Welcome to my world." He knew what I meant. I had been telling him about my lifetime of glitches and strange events, and I think right then he started to believe me. I called Mom before I wrote this to make sure that she wouldn't have a problem with it since our family would love for the ghost hunters and devil worshippers to go away. She said that she has no recollection of ever meeting Randall and me in Oklahoma, nor of going to Sacred Heart or the glitch about the road. I'm still in shock. I knew that what happened was definitely an event, whether it was a glitch or some kind of spooky thing. I never in a million years expected Mom to tell me that she doesn't remember ever being in Oklahoma with Randall and me. That certainly adds a fresh perspective to the entire situation, doesn't it? I can't explain any of it. I didn't even realize that I have no memory of the day spent at the church until I sat down to type this. I am completely flummoxed. Mom asked if Randall backs me up, and yes, he does. It was the highlight of his year to experience a glitch like that. I don't think he'd ever had one before. Now I can't wait to talk to him and ask him what we did all day in Kanawha. It's just the strangest thing, isn't it? There was a stranger on the road. This happened Wednesday of last week. I'm 22 and a manager of a Dollar General. I just locked the doors at 10 p.m. and was beginning the usual closing tasks when I got a call from my little brother. He's 17 years old and recently has really gotten into exploring abandoned buildings and climbing large structures, like radio towers. I will be honest, his new hobby does fill me with anxiety, but despite being a dumb teenager, he's still somewhat smart about his ventures, except for this time. When I answered the phone, he was asking for my help, told me he had been out exploring an abandoned house he'd come across, and he was just about to leave, but he said his car wasn't starting, that the battery was dead. He also told me that he was alone. Usually he'll be with a buddy, but he's got the kind of fearlessness where he doesn't bat an eye at solo adventures. He didn't want to call our mom either because she was under the impression that he was at a friend's, but instead he was a whole county away in the middle of nowhere alone. I was pissed about his carelessness but decided to spare the lecture until I was actually with him. I asked him to send me his location, and I would be heading there soon. Around 10:30, I concluded my closing duties and began accelerating along the path my GPS guided. Usually I never speed, but the idea of my little brother out on some Alabama backroad broken down alone didn't sit right with me. It took me about 40 minutes to get there. I started off on a pretty busy highway, turned off onto a very remote highway, and rode down that one for a long time. There was nothing but trees, fields, and the occasional tiny church. Eventually I turned right down a very narrow dirt road that I nearly missed. I had to drive slowly, it was very unkempt and bumpy. The tree line on each side was so thick with darkness, and to be honest, the whole vibe of the place made me really uneasy. I just had a bad feeling. I took an extremely sharp turn around a bend and saw my brother's car 100 feet ahead. Not even 3 seconds after my headlights had even shone onto his car, I saw him throw himself out of the car in complete hysterics. He's sprinting towards my car, screaming at the top of his lungs for me to unlock the doors. I come to a halt, and he jumps in and locks the door back. Not even giving me time to process his distress, he starts shouting at me to get us out of here and that there's someone else here. I'm an act first ask questions later type of person, so I immediately turn us around and floor it off that road. I'd never ever seen him in such a panic state before. He was sobbing, having a full-blown panic attack. I sped down the road, and by the time we made it back to the main highway, he'd calmed down. I asked him WTF happened or why he didn't call me, but soon realized that he had been too panicked to think about it. He said about 20-25 minutes after he called me asking for my help, he'd been sitting in his car listening to music and just staring off when way down the road ahead of him the figure of a man or human appeared. He said he was worried at first that maybe it was a landowner coming to yell at him, but instead the figure just stood in the middle of the road, clearly looking at him. It was too dark to make out anything about the figure other than they were clearly a person. He said the person just stood there unmoving for a good 3 to 4 minutes before they very slowly shifted to the right, vanishing into the trees and dark. At this point, pure panic had already set in for him, both because he was sure they were staring at his car and because of the unusual behavior of the figure. He said they didn't pop out of the trees until another 5 minutes had passed, but this time they had moved a good distance closer. He was fully freaking out now, thinking this person had to be messing with or, even worse, threatening him. He said he froze, his body not letting him do anything except stare out in terror. The figure continued to stand in the middle of the road, and then they shifted back into the tree line. He said the figure did it 2 more times, each time they had inched a couple of feet closer to his car. He said they'd been hiding in the trees again for about a minute once he saw my headlights behind him. The security of knowing I was there now is what gave him the courage to leap out of the car and make a break for it. Though the poor kid was so petrified he even left his phone behind in the car. We went back the next day around noon to jump the car off. My paranoid self even brought a weapon. The area was a lot less threatening in the daytime. The abandoned house could be seen through the trees to the left of the road, and to the right, a couple 100 yards behind us, was a smaller road that led to a small radio tower. Given it was bright out and my urge to know what had happened, I poked around with my brother. Other than the house, thick trees along the road, and the tower, there was nothing but fields to either side of us, no sign of a barn or farm or anything. I even looked around the ground floor of the house. My suspicion was maybe a squatter he missed in his venture was messing with him, but there was no sign of anyone actually living in the house. What unnerved me even more was the fact that around the back of the house a good stretch of the ground was littered in bones. They looked like cow vertebrae. There were hundreds of cleanly cut vertebrae everywhere. There weren't even cows in any of the fields nearby. I went back to the road and trekked ahead past his car, down to the stretch where he said the person had been standing. It was a dusty dirt road, so I was looking for footprints, any evidence that something was there, but there was nothing. After that we jumped out of the car and nudged into him a little bit, told him to never go exploring alone again, and then we left. I'm honestly at a loss. He's not the type of kid to make up stories like this, and also that level of distress I saw him in, I don't think anyone could fake it either. I felt like I was being watched, then my driver's side window shattered. Over Labor Day weekend last year, I drove from SLC-UT to Jackson, Wyoming, for a solo weekend of hiking and camping. On the drive up, I listened to one of my favorite podcasts, Tooth and Claw. One of the episodes I listened to was about Bigfoot and featured the guys from the Bigfoot Collectors Club podcast. The episode interested me enough to listen to one of the Bigfoot Collectors Club episodes that featured a couple of the guys from Tooth and Claw, episode number 218, The Michigan Dog Man. The episode didn't really spook me while listening to it, and the rest of the day/evening was totally normal. I hung around town later that evening, as the area I was camping in doesn't have great service, and I wanted to talk to my wife, who stayed in SLC for a friend's birthday. Driving from Jackson, Wyoming, to where I was camping is about a 30-minute drive, and it was about 9:30 when I left Jackson. My wife is from Michigan, so while catching up on the day's activities, I asked her if she had ever heard of the Michigan Dog Man. She had not, but the conversation turned into telling her about the Michigan Dog Man and her looking it up online. Skinwalkers were also brought up in the show, so we talked about those as well. Living in Utah and being part of the outdoor community, we had both heard about skinwalkers. During the course of our conversation about the Michigan Dog Man and skinwalkers, I started to get spooked. This escalated and turned into really spooky, full-body chills. Something is watching me, spooked. I glanced in my backseat, nothing. Glanced out the windows, nothing. It is pitch black, so I'm not sure I would have seen anything if it were there. I do this a few times. Then, at my driver's side window, I heard a big crashing sound. My window had completely shattered. There was no window left except a few shards of glass. The rest is on my lap and the floor of the car. I let out a primal scream as this was happening. With my adrenaline coursing and full-body chills going/still feeling like something had eyes on me, I drove a few more miles down the road, keeping close tabs on my surroundings as I was doing so. The only thing I saw in these few miles was a big bull elk on the side of the road, which acted like a totally normal bull elk and just watched me drive past. Knowing there was no way in hell I was camping that night, I flipped around at a viewpoint turnout and headed back to Jackson. I was on high alert, still feeling like I was being watched nearly the entire ride into town, but nothing else happened. As I approached town, I felt less spooked and more shook about what had just happened. Prior to this incident, I honestly thought this kind of stuff was a load of baloney and laughed off anything that's not science-based. While I still have no idea what really happened that night, and there's always a chance this was just a crazy coincidence, I feel like something weird was definitely going on out there. I would love to hear anyone's thoughts on my experience or share any other similar stories. America's 25 Strangest and Most Haunted Roads. There are numerous haunted and cursed roads in the United States, each with an intriguing backstory. While many of the tales of tragedies and dastardly deeds are based on actual events, others have been invented by thrill-seeking teenagers from a time when young people were much more imaginative than they are today. The following list is by no means comprehensive, and those mysterious roads in which the haunting falls solely within the haunted bridge category are omitted because to include them would be prohibitive. 1. Annie's Road, Totowa, New Jersey. According to the legend, some years ago, a young woman was killed in a motor vehicle accident on Riverview Road near the gates of Laurel Grove Cemetery, above. Ever since, the lady's spirit, now known as Annie, is occasionally seen on the side of the highway near the spot where she died, and if anyone attempts to follow her, she, much like Chicago's Resurrection Mary, strolls into the cemetery and disappears. This story figured prominently in the February 1992 Hail Mary murder, wherein 17-year-old Robert Soleimani Jr. was strangled to death by James Wanger, also 17, in a plot hatched by Wanger and 3 other teens. 2 Boy Scout Lane, Stevens Point, Wisconsin. There's more than one version of the story about this road off West River Drive, but the most popular version has it that back in the 1950s, a group of Boy Scouts hiked to this heavily wooded spot for a campout. At some point in the night, while the boys were sleeping contentedly in their tents beneath the trees, their troop leader, for reasons unknown, stealthily entered each tent and killed them all, one by one. Some traveling this dead-end stretch of road during the night claim the murdered boys still haunt the area and appear at random, often covered in blood from their wounds. The location where the mass murder allegedly occurred is now privately owned, and trespassing is discouraged. 3. Clinton Road, West Milford, New Jersey. On this lonely, roughly 10-mile highway beginning at Route 23 near Newfoundland, New Jersey, there are reports of phantom headlights that appear out of nowhere and closely follow drivers. Additionally, at a bridge near Dead Man's Curve, people say if one tosses a coin into the water, the pitiful spirit of a drowned boy will toss it back. However, the scariest location is the spot where an old house known as Cross Castle once stood. According to local tales, those who trespass have been chased by Satanists, modern-day druids, and others who utilize the site for their dark and mysterious rituals. 4. Cossert Road, Chadds Ford, Pennsylvania. Those who have seen the 2004 movie The Village are at least peripherally familiar with the area around Cossert Road, aka Devil's Road. It was because of the weird legends associated with the area that M. Night Shyamalan chose it as the setting for his film about a reclusive group of people who are afraid to leave the confinement of their settlement because of those we don't speak of, i.e., the dangerous creatures in the forest. A little more than 2 miles in length, the road is undeniably spooky, particularly at night, and in places, the crooked trees on either side seem to be bending away from the narrow, winding byway. According to legend, the ruins of an old, abandoned mansion built in the nearby woods by the DuPont family were later taken over by a satanic cult. Known for years as the Cult House, those who attempt to locate the place are chased by something demonic. 5. Dead Man's Curve, Claremont County, Ohio. Located in Bantam, where Route 222 meets Route 125, many have lost control of their vehicles on this curve, and before the advent of the automobile, horse-drawn conveyances sometimes overturned as drivers attempted to guide their animals along this difficult bend in the road. Accordingly, in 1968, when the highway was widened, the curve was straightened, to some extent. Unfortunately, around a month later, 5 teens in a Chevrolet Impala collided with a driver operating a green Roadrunner traveling at an estimated 100 miles per hour. It was following this crash that people began reporting 2 phantom cars in the area, one of which appears to be a vintage Chevy Impala. Other apparitions include a faceless hitchhiker, also a result of the 1968 accident, and a horse-drawn carriage, believed to be the manifestation of a long-ago mishap. 6. Devil Worshipper Road, Shibuda and Waynesboro, Mississippi. The narrow Waynesboro-Shibuda Road winds its way through 18 miles of dense forest and farmland, and there are dark spots where the sun shines only in winter after all the deciduous trees have lost their foliage. At night, lone drivers can easily become spooked, particularly when a horned, satyr-like creature brandishing a pitchfork suddenly appears in their headlights. Legend has it that many years ago, a local farmer made a pact with the devil, and when he died, Satan turned him into a 7-foot, cloven-hoofed demon destined to haunt the location where he practiced his worship of the Horned One until Judgment Day. Over the years, the story has attracted practitioners of the dark arts who gather in the woods just off the road and attempt to raise Old Scratch himself. People have reported seeing strange lights in the forest and finding peculiar burned areas, pentagrams, and other evidence of ritualistic activity. There also have been reports of vehicles shaking and stalling for no apparent reason, and something leaving mysterious handprints on windows. Many claim the entire 18-mile stretch of highway is haunted. Others, however, insist the Goat Man is seen only on the section of highway north of Clear Creek Baptist Church because the devil cannot pass a holy structure. 7. The Devil's Highway, New Mexico, Colorado, and Utah. Originally designated Route 666, above, the 193-mile road beginning in Gallup, New Mexico, was considered unlucky from the beginning because it bore the number of the beast. Some claimed there were many unexplained accidents along the godforsaken stretch, and lone drivers sometimes reported encountering faceless hitchhikers, skinwalkers, hellhounds, and other entities of the supernatural realm. Finally, in 2003, the highway was redesignated US 491, but the name change didn't exorcise the alleged demonic activity, for there are still reports of strange things along the lonely road, and those who find themselves driving the former Route 666 at night risk being forced off the highway by a phantom black car. 8. The Devil's Promenade, near Hornet, Missouri. Every evening, something very odd happens along a strip of East 50 Road, aka Spooklight Road, south of Hornet. The spooklight, as it is called, is a basketball-sized sphere seen through the trees long after the sun has completely set. It is usually green but has been known to shift in color and size, and nobody knows what causes it. There have been spooklight sightings in the area since the 19th century, and according to legend, the mysterious luminescence is the spirit of two lovers searching for each other. 9. Extraterrestrial Highway, Nevada. State Route 375 begins approximately 65 miles north of Las Vegas at Crystal Springs and runs 98 miles northwest to Warm Springs. Just south of 375 is Homey Airport or Groom Lake, better known as Area 51, and the road passes through Rachel, home of the Little Alien, a motel, restaurant, and souvenir shop that capitalizes on the region's UFO sightings. Those traveling Route 375 at night often witness mysterious lights and other aerial phenomena. 10. Ghost Road, Brooklet, Georgia. Railroad Bed Road, which, as its name suggests, is the site of a former railroad, is haunted by a ghost light, said to be the specter of a signalman who was decapitated when he was hit by a train. The man's body was recovered, but for some reason, his head was never found, and to this day, his spirit has walked the location where it happened in search of his missing head. Robertson Road, a narrow, unpaved thoroughfare connecting Railroad Bed Road with Highway 80, is haunted by a digging ghost, the apparition of a man with a spade diligently digging for something at the side of the road. Some say he is digging his grave, while others claim he is digging up a head, possibly that of the decapitated signalman. Railroad Bed Road has such a sinister reputation, it is featured in a documentary. 11. Haynesville Road, Aroostook County, Maine. This particular stretch of road, designated Route 2A, is so notorious there's a song about it, A Tombstone Every Mile, released in 1965 by truck driver turned singer Dan Curlis. In addition to an inordinate number of accidents, the highway is the domain of a vanishing hitchhiker, who appears suddenly in the headlights of lone travelers or walks along the side of the road waiting for someone to give her a ride. Some claim that she is the ghost of a young woman who perished in a crash on a cold night before help could arrive. A second apparition encountered on the Haynesville Road is that of a young girl hit and killed by a semi-truck. While there is no record of the lady who died of hypothermia, two 10-year-old Haynesville girls, Janet Marie Rouse and Melody Shorey, were killed when they were hit by a truck on August 22, 1967. 12. I-4 Dead Zone, Sanford, Florida. A section of Interstate 4 near Lake Monroe was constructed over a location known as the Field of the Dead, where victims of an 1887 yellow fever outbreak were buried. Truckers and others who frequently drive through the area have reported strange occurrences, including phantom voices coming over radios and cell phones inexplicably going dead. Some have even told of catching fleeting glimpses of human shapes on the side of the highway, which has a higher than average accident rate. 13. Jack Cole Road, Blount County, Alabama. According to legend, for well over 100 years, there has been an unusually high number of deaths associated with this dark, unpaved dead-end road in the town of Hayden, just north of Birmingham. Although some of these individuals, such as those who succumbed to cholera around 1900, did not actually die on the road itself, they were apparently transported to their final resting places along this route that cuts through thick woods. Furthermore, at some point, hunters came across an old cabin wherein they discovered the mummified remains of a woman, whom some believed was a witch responsible for many of the bizarre incidents in the area. Then, in the 1960s, a local farmer, the victim of an axe-wielding fiend, found his body at the end of Jack Cole Road. Sometime later, a photographer taking photos in the region reported seeing strange things in the woods adjacent to the thoroughfare, and shortly thereafter, he was found dead on or near Jack Cole Road. But not all the strange things associated with the location occurred in the distant past. In 2015, the home of Lisa Weaver, a 52-year-old disabled woman who lived on Jack Cole Road, caught fire, and when firemen arrived, they discovered the bodies of her 3 dogs in the rubble, but Mrs. Weaver's corpse was nowhere to be found. The lady had spoken with her son, Michael Weaver, minutes before the fire, so there's no doubt she was home when the conflagration started. 8 years later, she is still listed as a missing person. Many people traveling the road at night have reported seeing mysterious lights and human shapes darting about in the woods. Presumably, these phantoms are not of this world and, as such, cannot really harm anyone, but the same isn't true of the half-Bigfoot, half-wolf creature that has terrorized some who find themselves on Jack Cole Road on nights of the full moon. 2 men who allegedly encountered the beast late one moonlit night returned the following day and discovered clawed, 5-toed tracks they estimated to be at least 18 inches in length. 14. Jeremy Swamp Road, Southbury, Connecticut. There's a local tale that many years of inbreeding produced a race of humanoids with enormous heads atop puny bodies, commonly known as melon heads. These strange beings inhabit caves and tunnels in wooded areas and live off nuts, berries, and small animals, including pets. However, should the opportunity arise, they aren't averse to feasting on a tasty teenager or two. Adults whose cars stall at night on Jeremy Swamp Road have little to worry about, but young people are in danger of being captured, killed, and consumed by melon heads, for the nocturnal creatures seem to have an affinity for young, sweet meat. Unfortunately, those teens who think they're safe by avoiding this specific road at night are deluding themselves, for Zion Hill Road in Milford, Sawmill City Road in Shelton, Velvet Street in Trumbull, and various locations in Easton, Fairfield, Monroe, New Haven, Oxford, Stratford, and Seymour have their own colonies of melon heads. 15. Johns Bayou Road, Vancliffe, Mississippi. Several motor vehicle accidents have occurred in the same swampy location, above, on this road, with most survivors reporting a similar series of events. Drivers stop upon seeing what appears to be a great deal of blood on the road. After they investigate the unusual sight and return to their cars, headlights suddenly appear, causing a dark-colored van to crash into their stationary vehicles before disappearing into the darkness. Rumor has it that some years ago, a newly licensed teenager who came home with the front of his car bashed in swore his vehicle was hit by the dark van on Johns Bayou Road, but no one believed him. 16 Kelly Road, Ohioville, Pennsylvania. It is said that when animals scamper across the section of Kelly Road known as Mystery Mile, they become deranged. Additionally, the ghost of a pale boy in ragged clothing haunts the area, and people who have seen his apparition say the lad is surrounded by a bright, white, aura-like light. 17 Mona Lisa Drive, New Orleans, Louisiana. Around the turn of the 20th century, a rich philanthropist donated money to establish a portion of what is now known as City Park in New Orleans on the condition that it include a statue of his beloved daughter Mona, who had recently died. Unfortunately, the statue, which was reportedly located near Poppy Seeds Fountain, was repeatedly vandalized by wild teenagers and eventually removed. Ever since, people walking or driving along what some call Mona Lisa Drive at night have occasionally seen, and heard, the moaning white wraith of the lovely Mona. Those foolish enough to stop their cars to await her appearance have found scratches on their vehicles the following day. In another version of the story, the daughter's name was Lisa, and because her ghost supposedly moaned, she came to be known as Moaning Lisa, which, through the years, became Mona Lisa. 18. Ortega Ridge Road, Montecito, California. Those driving this section of road have reported seeing 3 nuns, aka Las Tres Hermanas, at the side of the highway. According to the legend, the nuns were attacked and killed by bandits many years ago, though why robbers would target nuns, who had taken vows of poverty and wouldn't have been carrying anything of value, no one knows. 19 Owaissa Street, Appleton, Wisconsin. People driving or walking along the section of North Owaissa Street adjacent to Riverside Cemetery after dark sometimes encounter the apparitions of mourners in old-fashioned attire. Whether the phantoms in black are connected to the legend of Kate Blood, whose grave, above, has become a favorite tourist attraction, particularly with teenagers, is unknown. Because of her name and the fact her burial plot is situated a distance from others in the sprawling, heavily wooded cemetery, there are rumors the lady was either a malevolent witch or a mad axe murderess. In fact, she was neither, just a young wife and mother who died of tuberculosis at the age of 23. 20 Prospectors Road, Garden Valley, California. During the California Gold Rush, when thousands of weary men dug day and night in hopes of striking it rich, those who bragged about their finds were in danger of being murdered by unscrupulous miners. The phantom of one such victim is said to appear from the bushes on this narrow road, exclaiming in a harsh whisper, "Get off my claim." 21 Sand Hill Road, Las Vegas, Nevada. The whispers and moans of a couple who died in an underground tunnel are occasionally heard on South Sand Hill Road near its intersection with East Olive Street. Additionally, there have been reports of the specter of an old woman who has been known to chase thrill seekers. 22. Seven Sisters Road, Nebraska City, Nebraska. Formerly known as L Road, the local name for this 2-lane highway approximately 5 miles south of Nebraska City is Seven Sisters Road. Legend has it that in the early 1900s, a man who lived on a nearby farm with his parents and 7 sisters got into an argument with other family members, and when the parents went visiting that evening, he somehow enticed, or forced, his sisters outside, one by one, and summarily ended them from trees located atop several hills. Although the trees are gone and some of the hills have been leveled, on moonlit nights, people hear what sounds like the blood-curdling cries of women in distress, cars inexplicably stall, and the ringing of phantom bells emanates from an old family graveyard. Those who have researched this legend believe the phenomenon predates the story, which was likely fabricated to explain the strange activity. 23. Shades of Death Road, Alamuchi Township, New Jersey. Yes, the road sign actually reads Shades of Death, which is creepy enough, but what makes this road even more chilling by night isn't the reports of thick fog and hangings that allegedly took place in the area, but rather the strange white light that appears just off the road at a place called Lenape Lane. People believe that if the light turns red, they will die within the year. 24. Spook Road, Brandon, South Dakota. In the spring and summer, this approximately 3-mile section of 264th Street containing 5 bridges, all of which cross Beaver Creek, can be inviting, but on dark nights after the trees have lost their leaves, it can be terrifying, particularly for those looking for ghosts. While no one is certain who or what haunts the location, some claim one crosses 5 bridges when driving east from Split Rock Boulevard, Route 11, but on the way back, there are only 4. It is on the way back that thrill seekers sometimes see the figure of a hanging man, either dangling from a tree to the side of the highway or on the road itself. Those who claim to have seen the apparition say the face is bloated, the eyes are rebulging, and the tongue is hanging out. One paranormal investigator who checked out Spook Road remarked, "Even though there is no documented history to support any of the claims of the road, is it possible that something is drawn to the area because people want it to be haunted? Remember that saying, be careful what you wish for because you just might get it." 25. Stagecoach Road, Marshall, Texas. For many years, stagecoaches rumbled along the red dirt thoroughfare, above, transporting passengers and goods to and from Shreveport, Louisiana, and Marshall, Texas, their iron-rimmed wheels cutting deeper into the clay with each trip. Today, the banks on either side are 10 feet high in some places, and the overhead trees totally block the light. It is said that at one time, a voodoo queen chased out of New Orleans took up residence in Marshall, where she sold potions and lucky gris-gris to locals and visitors and generally lived peacefully until her body was found on the side of Stagecoach Road. Even though it's been well over 100 years since the witch woman's murder, people say that when the moon is full, her malevolent specter wanders the spooky old road muttering curses against the town and shaking shrunken heads at anyone she meets. A historical plaque marking Stagecoach Road is located at Pine Bluff Baptist Church, approximately 2.5 miles south of the road itself. The incident happened when I was 15, near Algonquin Park. My father and I were driving up to our cottage in the middle of winter. I was always so amazed at the beauty of Algonquin Park in Muskoka and had grown up enjoying it every summer. Our cottage was on a large lake, about a 30-minute drive from the nearest town. There were probably thousands of cottages on the lake. During the summer, the lake and the town's population tripled. It was cottage country, so people would spend all summer enjoying the lake and warm nights around campfires with family and friends. I spent every summer there growing up, and it still brings fond memories of sunshine and laughter and the sound of motorboats on the lake. But the winters were different. The people that didn't live there all year would venture back home to the city life, leaving the area mostly deserted, with cottages boarded up for the winter. There were a few people that still frequently would come up every couple of months for a few days or so, but for the most part the lake was silent during the winters, and the town was just filled with locals. The beautiful pine trees are always covered with snow, making the forest quiet. Our cottage was on a dead-end road. There were about 20 other cottages on the road, with ours being somewhat in the middle. The cottages were quite spaced out, however, with our closest neighbors being too far away to see through the trees. My dad had needed to head up to the cottage to do some painting that my mom had been bugging him to do. It was at the end of February, and it was a long weekend, so I tagged along so he wouldn't be alone and we could spend some quality time together. It was about a 5-hour drive from our home, but turned out to be an 8-hour drive due to the heavy snow. It had gotten dark out quite early, and it was around midnight as we drove through Algonquin Park. It was deadly quiet and pitch black except for the headlights of the car. We finally passed through the park, with only about 30 minutes left to get to the cottage. It had stopped snowing, and we were both eager to get there. As we turned onto the familiar road, I remember my dad cursing. It hadn't been plowed yet. This wasn't surprising, however, it probably wouldn't be until later the next day that we would even see a snow plow. As we drove down the road, I noticed there was a fresh set of tire tracks. The Smiths must be up for the weekend, my dad had said. All of a sudden, as we drove around the bend, following the tire tracks, the headlights of the car shone on a white van that was parked on the side of the road. It was almost hidden by the vast trees that were covered with snow. "What the?" my dad mumbled. As we drove past the white van, I remember looking back through the back window and very clearly seeing 2 figures in the front seat illuminated by our retreating tail lights. I told my dad this, and he shrugged. "Maybe they're lost." I nodded but couldn't help to think about how it was a dead-end road, and why they would feel the need to park there. As we pulled into our driveway and we started bringing our stuff in, I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. I couldn't stop thinking about that van and why it was there, with two people just sitting in the dark in the middle of the night. It spooked me so much that I begged my dad to let me sleep upstairs with him, instead of sleeping downstairs in the room my sister and I usually shared. It had big windows with no blinds that looked out into the blackness of the forest, and my 15-year-old self was already scared of the dark, even without seeing the white van. It wasn't a big deal when my sister was there, but not tonight. As my dad got ready for bed, I sat in the living room reading a book. My dad had turned all the lights off, and I was just using a small lamp next to the couch to try and get through one last chapter before bed. It was so quiet I could almost hear my ears ringing. I also started to get the feeling that I was being watched. The living room had large windows, also with no curtains, that overlooked the lake, and it was black except for a light or two from cottages across the lake. I shut off the lamp and got up. Now that the cottage was dark, the moon was shining brightly, illuminating the snow. It was beautiful, and I walked towards the window to get a better look. Movement caught my eye, and I remember my heart dropping as I saw two figures down by the back porch, below the window, barely hidden by the surrounding trees. I dropped to the floor and crawled towards the bedroom where my dad was sleeping, my heart in my throat. I wasn't sure if they had seen me or not. I woke my dad up, and by the time he got to the window, the two figures were gone. Where I had seen the figures, two sets of footprints in the snow lead back around to the front of the cottage and back down the driveway. I begged my dad not to go outside. He double-checked the locks and turned on the porch lights, hopefully to scare anyone off. My dad wasn't as freaked out as I was, but still set the alarm before he headed back to bed. I remember being very freaked out, and I lay there all night next to my dad, terrified I'd look out the window and see someone staring back at me. The next morning my dad went outside and confirmed that there were two sets of footprints leading from the road to in behind our cottage, and then back around to the front of the cottage and back up to the road. There were tire marks that showed the vehicle had turned around and then gone back up to the main road. My dad guessed that they were probably looking to break in and steal stuff as it was the middle of winter, and not too many people were up at the lake, but they knew we were there. They would have seen our tire tracks leading to our cottage, and my dad's car parked out front. They also may have seen the lamp I had turned on to read, and are seeing it go off. My dad didn't have an answer to that, and after much back and forth, he called the non-emergency line and reported it. Apparently there had been some break-ins in the area, and some stuff had been stolen from some cottages that were boarded up for the winter. But again, and I still wonder to this day, why would they be interested in stealing from a house that clearly has people inside it? Not that strange, but I have one. I'm into all things paranormal/weird, that's why I'm here, duh. During our road trip to the Grand Canyon, my partner and I immersed ourselves in listening to mythology podcasts about the Southwest. We listened to many stories about skinwalkers and legends related to the areas we'd be visiting. One of the points surrounding the skinwalker legend is that the entity has to be invited in or something. In any case, my partner and I have an excellent trip, we see a variety of things, and it is wonderful. After hiking the Grand Canyon, we head back to our hotel in Page, Arizona, and stop for gas. This man in a cowboy hat approaches us. He will ask for some money or for us to buy him something, so I roll down the window, and he just starts chatting. He's a Mormon Navajo cowboy who fell off the wagon and got kicked out of his family's Easter dinner. It was Easter. This person just starts telling us his life story, and some parts are very intriguing, but after 30 minutes of this, my partner and I are ready to leave. I have no idea how this man ended up in our car and got us to agree to drive him to Page with us. The whole time he was sharing stories of varying degrees of truth. Some stories are about his life and things that have happened to his family as natives living near the canyon, and some are wild theories about evil ancient ancestors like the Anasazi, the Holy Grail, UFOs, and Jim Morrison. Somewhere along the ride, I realized that we've let him in, so if he is a skinwalker, we're ducked. When we got to Page, we gently told him we were exhausted. He insisted on following us back to the hotel. We dropped him off at a bar after buying him some booze for the stories. The weirdest part is that I really can't remember how he got into our car. He just squandered his way in there. To this day, I still wonder if we encountered a skinwalker who might have taken pity on us for being nice. Of all the weird stuff out there, skinwalkers are probably the least believed in, but it was so strange that he brought up so many of the things we'd been thinking about. Anyway, that's the long story, and if you've listened to it, thanks for your time. So my boyfriend started to tell me about an experience he had with his buddies in high school. In rural NWPA, on a late-night country drive, they saw Dog Man by the side of the road. Except he just said creature and described him, and hey, I even gave him a cute nickname. They all saw one again at some point here or there at different times throughout the years. Well, now one has been hanging around his house, popping in a couple of times a week. He doesn't so much actually see him all the time, but he's heard noises, something big outside, and most of all, he gets a weird static noise in his head and a feeling when he's around. From what I've read, his experiences line up with other accounts that he has never heard or read. In fact, he didn't even know his buddy was a thing until a couple of weeks ago when I decided to look into it and found out that he's not alone. And this dude, I know for a fact, can't lie for shit. I watched him try, and it's pretty funny. So I know he's telling me the truth about the rest of this. Okay. He has also seen the Hat Man. Also didn't know he was a thing. This stuff freaks him out, so he doesn't really go looking around doing research about it. But the Hat Man is new for him, and he's seen him a couple of times in the last month, just hanging out and watching him. Also, here's where it gets weird. He's seen men in black twice in his life. He looked the dead one in the eyes one time and has never talked about his experiences to anyone but me and his dad. Well, also lately, he's been seeing a black 1980 Ford Limited driving around his house. He's lived there for 8 years. The car isn't parked anywhere nearby. They've only been coming around for about a year. There's also a weird, helicopter / whooshing / rotating something sound from outside that I have heard a couple of times. The sound coincides with the car sightings. So my question is, has anyone else had this combination of things taken interest in them? Or has anyone read accounts of someone having this trio of phenomena happen to them? Is there a connection? What should we do? Phantom / ghost car in the German woods? Okay, I'm not sure if this is the right place to share this. Guys, I'm not particularly religious, spiritual, or anything like that. I'm just a young man doing his job, hitting the gym, and trying to meet my daily protein needs. I'm not superstitious, nor do I believe in ghosts or demons, or aliens, although that would be cool, but that's a different story. But something weird happened yesterday. I'm not overly scared, but the more I think about it, and after briefly researching the internet in general, I wanted to share my thoughts and hear your opinions. So, here's the story. My friend bought a new car the day before yesterday. It's a brand new car. Cool ride. So, we met yesterday and drove around for a bit. We cruised along the highway, drove through the city, and checked out the car. There's a bit of snow here in Germany, and since it had rained slightly, the roads were a bit icy, not extremely slippery, but definitely icy in some spots. At the end of our 1.5-hour drive and goofing around, my friend said, "Lass uns den Name des Berges Berg hoch equals let's drive up the, insert mountain name mountain." It's a nearly 700-meter, 2,297-foot, high mountain you can drive up, with the road surrounded by forest. We drove up cautiously and noticed that with every meter, there was more snow, and it was getting pretty slippery in places. As we drove up, we joked about forest people, tree aliens, and skinwalkers, which lightened the tense atmosphere. We kept going, but it got curvier and icier, and we realized it might not have been the best idea to drive this route in a new car at this time of night. It was around 8:30 p.m. and pitch dark outside. We considered turning around somewhere so we wouldn't have to go all the way back down, but we couldn't find a spot to turn. Either there was no opportunity, or the small hiking trails leading off the road were completely iced over and snow-covered. After a few minutes, we reached the top and turned around. We began driving back down. After the first curve, we started sliding a bit, just for a few meters. The car immediately regained traction, and we laughed about how dumb it was to drive up here in the first place. My friend slowed down even more, and we made steady progress. All good so far. Now comes the strange part. We approached a curve. This curve was so steep that you could see the road leading out of it through the trees on the right side during the day. Right before we approached the curve, my friend said, "Guck mal, da kommt noch ein Vogelhawk, equals look, someone else is coming up." I, sitting in the passenger seat, looked to the right and also saw headlights from another car. The left headlight was slightly brighter than the right one, almost as if the right headlight was about to break. As we approached the curve, the car was no longer visible because the forest got denser. Maybe 2 seconds passed. We were just about to hit the apex of the curve. We could still see the lights of the other car on the other side of the curve. My friend turned off his high beams. We waited maybe another 3 seconds to see if the car coming from below would take the curve first and pass us. But since we only saw the lights and it didn't come, we slowly drove into the curve ourselves. It must have been at most 5 seconds in total. After the curve, the road continues straight for at least 800 meters. There were no places to turn, not even icy ones. To the left of the road, it drops off steeply, and to the right, the slope rises sharply, far too steep for any car to manage. When we completed the curve, suddenly, there was no car. There was absolutely no car present. I looked around, hardly able to believe it. There was no car anywhere. It was pitch dark, and I couldn't see any lights. No tail lights or headlights, not even somewhere in the forest or anything. There was no car in front of us. It's impossible that the car reversed down the hill at speed because the road was still too slippery, and after the curve, we had a clear view of the straight stretch ahead. When I got home, I looked at a map to review the area. There were no other roads nearby. Even the map showed no turning points, not even theoretically. I'm a little confused, especially since my friend saw it all too. As I said, I don't know if this is the right place for this. Was that a phantom car?